The story follows Adonijah, whose name literally means eternity. She was born a princess daughter of the emperor and the late empress, Diana, who died giving birth to her. Before her death, Diana left her baby a mysterious magical kiss, though no one knew exactly what kind of power it carried. After losing his wife, the emperor went completely off the rails. He ordered everything she ever touched to be burned and destroyed. The only thing he spared was the baby, Adonijah. But instead of love, she got the royal cold shoulder. Her father ignored her, so the servants did the same, figuring, if even the emperor doesn't care, why should we? Even as a baby, Adonijah had strange experiences. She once wandered into a magical world where a voice called out to her. There, she found a book that showed her entire life, everything that would happen to her. Shocked, she read that one day she'd be accused of black magic, and her own father would lock her away in a tower forever. Every night, her father's icy stare haunted her dreams. The only warmth in her life came from Lillian, a kind-hearted servant who had once been her mother's friend. Lillian gave up her noble life just to stay and care for the lonely princess. Even as a toddler, Adonijah knew her life was headed for disaster. She couldn't fight back yet, but she understood she'd have to change her fate somehow. Her biggest obstacle? Her father, Emperor Cloud, a man so powerful he could wipe out an entire kingdom alone. And that's my dad, she thought bitterly. 3 years passed, and things brightened a little. More maids joined the palace staff, enchanted by Adonijah's sweetness and charm. But among them was one greedy maid who only cared about stealing treasures that once belonged to the late empress. When Adonijah asked what she was looking for, the maid brushed her off, assuming she was just some random gardener's kid, and told her to show her where the gold was. Adonijah, realizing the woman's intent, mischievously led her to fields of sunflowers and wheat instead. Then, pretending to be helpful, she innocently mentioned that there were still utensils decorated with gems left in the palace. The maid fell for it, thinking the little girl was her partner in crime. She started stuffing jewels into bags, and that's when Adonijah struck. She grabbed the jewelry first, and when the woman tried to attack her, the princess hurled all the decorations at her. The commotion brought the other maids running, who caught the thief red-handed. But Adonijah knew it wasn't just luck. In the book of her future, she'd seen this same maid try to rob and stab Lillian. By acting early, she'd saved her caretaker and secretly kept the jewels for herself, knowing she'd need them one day. Meanwhile, Emperor Cloud remained as cold as ever. When his assistant, Felix, reported the incident and mentioned that his daughter had bravely stopped a thief, the emperor didn't even flinch. Somewhere far away, a man sensed that the destiny of the entire empire was beginning to change and that its source was inside the palace. Adonijah realized she wasn't the main heroine of this story, just a side character. And when she turned 12, things would only get worse. She'd meet her half-sister Jeanette, a beautiful, elegant girl blessed with magic and possibly their father's love. Adonijah didn't want that future, the rejection, the exile, the pain. So before her 8th birthday, she started hoarding coins and jewels, planning to run away with Lillian one day. She even hid gems in kitchen utensils, though that sometimes left her covered in chocolate after snacking on sweets. One day, while washing her hands at a fountain, she caught her reflection, her mother's face, but her father's eyes. Maybe he hates me because I only got his looks, not his magic, she thought. She wandered into the forest to hide her treasures, scaring off a squirrel in the process, but when she returned later, she found the same squirrel digging up her stash. Panicking, she bribed it with a peanut and went deeper into the woods, where she discovered a strange underground vault filled with little golden cherubs. She bit one to check, yep, real gold. And that's when she ran straight into her father, Emperor Cloud himself. It was their first real meeting. The emperor froze, stunned by how much she looked like the late empress. Adonijah, on the other hand, was terrified. This wasn't supposed to happen until she was 8. Cloud's face gave away nothing, and even his aide Felix seemed nervous. Then, breaking the tension, the emperor casually commented that she was a bit chubby and tugged at her cheeks. Finally, he ordered Felix to prepare tea because, apparently, the mighty emperor had decided to have tea time with his daughter. Something sweet was served. Adonijah barely touched her dessert, too stunned by the man before her. Sitting right in front of her was the man who, according to the book of her fate, would one day hate her, accuse her of witchcraft, and lock her in a tower. Yet here he was, calmly sipping tea. Cloud watched his shy daughter in silence until she quietly confirmed she could speak. Felix tried to ease the tension by saying children were often shy and got kicked out so father and daughter could talk alone. Cloud commented on her name. Adonijah, eternity and immortality. Worthy of a royal heir. He even admitted envy. Despite killing his tyrant brother to take the throne, his own name felt less noble. Remembering the late Empress Diana, who'd chosen the name, softened him. When he asked who taught her manners, she proudly said, Lillian. Cloud recalled the maid begging to raise the child and had agreed without thinking. Then came the tense question. Do you know who I am? Adonijah froze. Felix had told her to say, Your Majesty, but she blurted, You're my father. Expecting punishment, she panicked, but Cloud's eyes lit up with joy. Later, Felix returned her to the worried servants, announcing that the emperor wanted to see her again, shocking everyone. When Cloud summoned Lillian and Adonijah, he thanked the maid for raising his daughter, claiming royal duties had kept him away, but that Adonijah would now live by his side. Everyone rejoiced except Adonijah, who still suspected her father might be a demon in royal robes. Her life changed overnight. Daily tea with the emperor, luxurious treatment, and new clothes. Yet she clung to her secret plan to escape before turning 8, taking her saved coins and jewels. Cloud, meanwhile, grew intrigued by her. He noticed her love for shiny things and began enjoying their awkward, sweet tea times. For the first time, she dared to hope he might truly love her. Then came the trip to the lake. Dressed beautifully, she beamed when Cloud called her healthy and plump, taking it as a compliment, and even told him he looked handsome. He remained unreadable. They boarded a small boat, though Adonijah couldn't swim. As Cloud steered the boat with magic, she admired his radiant golden hair and wondered if her blue eyes matched his. Then she spotted a glowing lotus, reached for it, and fell into the water. Dragged down by weeds, she thought it was the end, until Cloud dove in and saved her, drying her instantly with magic. Calm but firm, he declared, Tomorrow, I'll teach her to swim. I won't let her be defenseless again. Later, Lillian explained that the glowing lotuses were magical traps, affecting only those without magic, making Adonijah the most vulnerable in the palace. That night, Cloud returned to the lake, where the lotuses formed an illusion of his late wife, Diana. For the first time, he admitted he no longer hated his daughter. The next morning, Adonijah awoke to chaos, a crowd of servants kneeling, newly assigned to her service. Even Felix knelt, pledging himself as her temporary personal guard. Little Adonijah dreams of someone with a familiar face, though she can't remember who it is. When she wakes up, she realizes she's being carried by Felix, who cheerfully tells her that His Majesty wants to have breakfast with her. Adonijah blinks in confusion. Why would the emperor himself want breakfast with her? And why doesn't he have guards around? Felix laughs, saying Claude needs none. His magic is enough. Then he adds that the emperor would love to be woken by his little princess. Adonijah nearly faints. Waking the emperor sounds like suicide. Still, she enters his grand chamber, filled with treasures and even a golden map. She spots Claude sleeping in a chair and notices a portrait of a man who looks just like the one who banished her in her dream. Mischievously, she pinches his cheeks, but when he stirs, she panics and hums a lullaby somehow. It puts him back to sleep. Later, Claude wakes with slightly red cheeks, and Adonijah awkwardly tries to talk about the palace. He smiles faintly and lets her explore freely. Felix then announces a nobleman's arrival, and before Adonijah leaves, Claude casually tells her to have breakfast with him every morning to her surprise. Exploring the palace, Adonijah searches for a portrait of her mother, Diana, but finds only unfamiliar faces. Finally, she discovers a burned painting bearing her mother's name. Nearby, nobles gossip cruelly about her lack of magic and her mother's lowly background. Before they can mock further, Claude appears, his icy glare silencing them. He orders that Diana's name never be spoken again. Hidden, Athanasia realizes how deeply her mother's memory pains him. That night, she stares at the ruined painting, hums her lullaby, and falls asleep. The next morning, she joins Claude for breakfast again, trying to appear confident. He mostly listens in silence. When she tastes his tea and says, "It tastes like flowers blooming in my mouth," Claude freezes. Those were Diana's exact words. He quickly changes the subject, and Athanasia realizes she's struck a nerve. Heartbroken, she later burns her drawings of her mother. Meanwhile, Athanasia overhears Felix and Lillian discussing, showing her Claude's memories of Diana. Frightened, she begs them not to, fearing her father will hate her. Felix assures her Claude never hated her or Diana, showing her the palace's magic barrier which only she and Diana can freely pass. That night, Claude sits alone with the restored drawings. When Athanasia visits, saying she missed him, he hugs her and murmurs, "You're becoming bold, just like your mother." He teases her to sing the lullaby again, this time while he's awake. As she sings, Claude's magic fills the room with warmth and light, revealing memories of Diana smiling. Father and daughter watch together, their hearts softening. When the song ends, they drift to sleep side by side, surrounded by gentle light and long-forgotten peace. The Emperor wished to assign Princess Athanasia a study partner, since her powers still hadn't awakened. The Duke wasted no time and offered his son Smart, 3 years older, and apparently everyone's favorite overachiever. But in Athanasia's dreams, that same guy had introduced another girl as the future heir to the throne and used her to climb the royal ladder. Now, in the present, he supposedly liked that same girl too. Athanasia was convinced he just wanted to cozy up to her for power. Before anyone could say more, she cut them off. Yes, she knew the Duke's son was talented, well-read, and probably thought he was some kind of prodigy. But so what? She'd already studied everything he had alone. She didn't want foolish friends. No one could match her in studies. The only thing he had over her was magic, which, to her, was an unfair advantage. They dropped the topic for another day. In Aeolus, there was a magical planetarium that measured how much magic someone had. The faster it spun, the stronger the person. When Athanasia tried it, though, it didn't move at all. Her father was powerful. Her mother had danced with magic in every motion, so how could she have none? 2 years passed. While her maid bought fruit in the market, people gossiped about how much the Duke adored his daughter. He'd even built her a private library. Everyone assumed Athanasia would inherit the throne. Then a mysterious man appeared. He noticed something strange. The maid wasn't supposed to be alive. Her fate had been rewritten. Soon after, that annoying Duke showed up again. 2 years hadn't changed him much. He worried that the princess still had no classmate and said he knew the perfect one, a girl his own age, whom he had taught personally. Athanasia's heart sank. It was the same girl from her dreams, the one destined to take her place. The newcomer was brilliant, especially in law. The plan was simple: get close to the princess, meet her father, and rise in power. But Athanasia didn't need law lessons. She could recite the whole code by heart. She was a true scholar, and she wanted classmates who were just as sharp. To make her point, she handed the Duke a book in a foreign language, one she had translated herself. "I don't want foolish friends," she whispered. Before heading to the garden, her father gifted her a book she'd long desired, written by a nameless magician and filled with ancient spells. He warned her that it contained a powerful enchantment, one that might awaken her magic. He wasn't sure it would work, but it was worth trying. The moment she opened it, the book began to move. And suddenly, she saw the same mysterious man again. He had finally found her, the girl who could control destiny itself. But Athanasia was still just a child, so naturally, she assumed he was mistaken. Then, out of nowhere, Felix stepped forward and, with one swift motion, the man pushed him back using magic. Before leaving, the man gave him a warning. Never finish that spell. It's too dangerous. After that, Felix remembered nothing. Still curious, he told the Emperor that maybe the princess should have a friend her own age. The poor girl lived surrounded by adults and had no one to talk to. She must have been lonely. Meanwhile, Athanasia wasn't exactly impressed by the adults around her. In her mind, they were so useless they couldn't even control one child. Every morning, she sat for tea like royalty, the table overflowing with cakes. And now, finally, she was allowed to eat chocolate. Except, the ones she'd hidden in the kitchen had mysteriously disappeared. Her father, taking Felix's advice, asked gently if she wanted a friend her age. If she said yes, he'd find one. But she shook her head. "I already have friends and cakes. That's enough. I just want peace until I turn 18. Still, deep down, Athanasia knew she'd need to master magic if she wanted to change her destiny. So, ignoring the mysterious man's warning, she tried the spell again. The book's chains rattled and broke open. Suddenly, the same man appeared, staring right at her. "Are those eyes from the imperial family?" he asked. People with her jewel-like eyes were said to have died out 400 years ago. Her father was the current emperor, but those eyes were supposed to belong only to the ancient bloodline. The legend said that people with eyes like hers could wield immense power, yet she had none. So how had she managed to twist the threads of fate itself? The man decided she was too dangerous to know the truth and cast a spell to put her to sleep. But even as her consciousness faded, Athanasia refused to give up. He was about to end her life when a cloud appeared out of nowhere and swept her away. Terrified, she tried to cast a spell, and to her shock, a shimmering shield formed in front of her. For the first time, she smiled, thrilled by the spark of power. But her vision blurred, the world faded, and the last thing she saw was her father's boots, dripping with blood. As Athanasia collapsed from the wild surge of magic, panic tore through the palace. The king, terrified, ordered guards to summon the best healers in the empire. Soon, the Ruby Palace overflowed with top-tier wizards, but none could explain, let alone cure, her condition. One by one, they failed, leaving only silence and a worried king. Exhausted, the king stood by her bedside as Felix urged him to rest. But before he could, pain gripped his chest just as Lucas, the confident young sorcerer, entered the room, ready to take control. Meanwhile, in her dreams, Athanasia saw her mother singing softly before Lucas's voice interrupted, urging her to wake. Her eyes flickered open briefly, catching sight of him before she drifted off again. When she finally woke for real, Lucas teased her while she realized the pain in her chest was gone. He smugly revealed he'd saved her without him. Her heart would have exploded. Athanasia stared in disbelief, noticing he looked smaller than usual. When the king, Felix, and Lily entered, relief flooded the room. Lily wept, saying she'd prayed for her every day. Athanasia, touched, was stunned to learn she'd been asleep for a month. The king gently lifted her, asking if she felt pain. She assured him she was fine and asked if he'd worried. Of course he had. Lucas then cut in, explaining her magic had gone berserk and that he'd absorbed the excess to save her. The king anxiously asked if there were side effects. Lucas confidently said no and added that her magic was extraordinarily pure, powerful enough to make her the greatest ruler in history. Everyone was stunned. Lily cried with joy. Felix joked she might rival the king, but Lucas warned her power could surge again since her body wasn't ready. Right after that, he collapsed dramatically. The king rushed to help, but Lucas weakly insisted he was only drained, having used all his strength. The king, moved, promised him a reward and ordered him to stay at the palace to monitor her. Lucas bowed politely, but his sly grin revealed he was faking it. Athanasia saw through the act immediately. Soon after, the king decided she'd move from the Ruby Palace to the Emerald Palace, the traditional home of royal princesses. Athanasia froze. In her dreams, the Emerald Palace belonged to Jeanette, while she remained trapped in the Ruby Palace. Her fate had changed, but fear crept in that Jeanette's arrival might bring the tragedy back. Later that day, Athanasia tried measuring her magical energy, but the device didn't even react. She frowned, doubting all that talk about her immense power. Lucas, lounging nearby and casually eating chocolate, assured her he wasn't lying. He explained that her magic had been sealed to keep her from tearing herself apart. Without the seal, her body would have exploded from the overload. He reminded her that he was the one who saved her and expected a little gratitude. Athanasia wasn't convinced. She eyed him suspiciously and asked why someone claiming to be a great wizard looked like a child. Lucas replied that he'd been asleep for 400 years and was using this form because it conserved energy. Besides, he'd already used most of his remaining power to save her. Still unimpressed, Athanasia accused him of exaggerating his weakness to enjoy palace life and free food. Lucas didn't even deny it. In fact, he admitted that sounded way better than working. Her annoyance grew. She then accused him of stealing her chocolates too. He gasped in fake offense, claiming someone of his caliber would never do that. But before he could finish, she pointed at a tiny creature caught nibbling her sweets. Lucas chuckled and said she was half right, it wasn't him. With a snap of his fingers, a spark of magic hit the little creature, transforming it into a cute, fluffy cat. The creature immediately bolted into her arms for safety. She froze, then recognized it as the same being that had saved her life. Smiling, she thanked it softly. Lucas rolled his eyes and said it only acted on instinct. It was her familiar, a divine beast born from her own magic. Intrigued, Athanasia stroked its fur and asked if it liked sweets. Lucas admitted it did, probably because it shared her sweet tooth. She scolded the creature gently, and Lucas joked that it had learned bad habits from her. When he called it over, it clung tighter to Athanasia, trembling. She laughed, holding it protectively and declaring it was hers now. She named it Raven and asked if it would stay with her. Lucas sighed and warned her not to hold it too tightly. When she asked why, his tone darkened. Raven was made of her own magical energy. The last time she touched it directly, she had absorbed too much and nearly died. If it happened again, she wouldn't survive. Shaken, Athanasia asked what she should do. Lucas's answer was simple: learn to control your magic. The next day, Athanasia practiced magic under her tutor's watchful eye. For a moment, her floating spell worked, then fizzled out. Her tutor smiled awkwardly, calling it progress, though his tone betrayed concern. Later, he told Lily that Athanasia might have reached her limit. No amount of training could push her further. Back in her room, Athanasia sat frustrated, unable to steady her magic. She sighed, wondering what she was doing wrong, until Raven shuffled over. Smiling, she picked it up and teased, "You really do take after me." Then, Lucas appeared on her balcony like he owned the place, claiming he was keeping an eye on her. With a flick, he magically pulled Raven away, saying it was for her own good. Arrogantly, he offered to teach her magic if she gave him Raven, boasting he was better than her tutors. Athanasia refused and demanded Raven back. Before she could argue further, Lucas sensed something and quickly returned it just as the king walked in. Lucas bowed, while Athanasia hid Raven behind her back. When the king asked what she was hiding, Lucas smoothly explained it was a magical creature born from her overflowing energy, one he was studying. The king's face darkened with concern. He asked if that creature had caused her previous collapse. Athanasia tried to explain, but Lucas jumped in again, saying that killing the creature might release unstable magic back into her body. He suggested letting it live under supervision instead. Very noble of him, considering it helped him too. Realizing Lucas was secretly backing her up, Athanasia quickly agreed and begged her father to let her keep Raven. After some hesitation, the king finally sighed and gave in, but only if she held it for 1 hour each day. Athanasia's face lit up with joy as she ran to hug him, saying she loved him. While practicing magic again, Athanasia's spell fizzled, then exploded, leaving her coughing in smoke and frustration. She groaned, wondering who had sealed her magic, until an apple smacked her head. Lucas stood there, unimpressed, scolding her for recklessness and warning that one mistake could kill her. Annoyed but knowing he was right, Athanasia glared at him. Lucas pointed to her shattered spell circle, saying her lack of control could destroy her. Determined, she asked him to teach her, but he refused, claiming he saw no reason to help someone who disliked him. Then his stomach growled. Embarrassed, he admitted he needed to regain energy, but there was no quick fix. Athanasia suddenly realized her overflowing magic could recharge him, sparking an idea for a deal. Soon after, she met her father and Duke Eel, who warmly welcomed her back. She recognized him and thought he sure didn't waste time returning. Felix mentioned they'd been discussing her potential companions. Curious, she asked if that included Duke Snowy's son. The Duke said his son was still abroad, but Jeanette admired her and wished to be her friend. The king assured Athanasia she didn't have to agree, but she smiled, saying it might be nice to have friends. Delighted, the Duke promised to send Jeanette soon just as Lucas barged in, declaring he'd oversee Athanasia's growth. The Duke's smile instantly vanished. Training began and Lucas's methods were brutal. First, he had her channel magic into a pen. It didn't move. Next, potion making her healing potion exploded. So he switched to physical training, making her run laps for stamina, then balance training to synchronize her energy with nature, essentially wizard yoga. That night, he assigned her an overwhelming stack of advanced reading, including spatial analytical geometry. Horrified but resolute, she studied tirelessly. Her days became a blur of dawn runs, endless practice, and late night studying until she collapsed over her desk. One night, Lucas found her asleep with her magic still humming and quietly acknowledged how hard she was working. A month later, she proudly announced she'd finished her studies and asked for the next step. Lucas stared at her intently, asking why she was pushing herself so hard. She answered simply because her life depended on it, but his expression made her wonder if that was all. Later, while walking with her father, his hair got caught in her hairpin. She gently untangled it, refusing Felix's help, and when he asked how it looked, she smiled and said it was perfect. That night, Felix brought the king a report confirming Lucas's true identity. He was from the imperial family, though much of his past was lost. The king asked if keeping him near Athanasia was dangerous. Felix admitted it could be, but the king used magic to confirm Lucas's harmlessness. Relieved, he dismissed Felix, who noted how deeply the king cared for Athanasia. Left alone, the king gazed out the window, quietly wondering for the first time what it truly meant to love. Athanasia believed she could master anything if she just worked hard enough, but she couldn't have been more wrong. Frustrated, she lashed out at Lucas, accusing him of being the worst teacher ever. He just shrugged, asking if she really expected him to spoon-feed her every little thing. She argued that she was still learning and wanted him to be a bit nicer. But Lucas, ever the smug wizard, explained that magic was about channeling your own energy and forming a bond with the elements. Basically, figure it out yourself. When his vague explanation pushed her over the edge, she smacked him and demanded that he start acting like an actual teacher. Lucas just laughed, calling her a weird kind of genius. Annoyed, she begged him to take her training seriously, complaining that he made her do everything while he barely moved a finger. In response, Lucas casually showed off objects floated, tea poured itself, and the room cleaned up in seconds. He explained that this was his magic, but hers would have to come from her own effort. When Athanasia realized he really meant "you're on your own," she snapped, asking if he couldn't at least show her one tiny spell. Lucas refused, saying that magic that isn't earned can never truly belong to her. She demanded proper instructions. He laughed again, asking if she was finally admitting she was an idiot. Furious, she crossed her arms and refused to answer. Later at breakfast, she zoned out staring at a pomegranate, mumbling that she'd been trying to convince it to split open. Her father, King Felix, chuckled before gently advising her not to force things if it felt too hard. She should find another way. Encouraged, Athanasia decided she'd figure it out herself. Sometime later, Athanasia lay on the sofa, exhausted from studying. Lucas commented on her lack of manners, and she blamed his harsh training methods. He told her this was how magic had always been taught for the last 400 years. Surprised, she asked if he'd learned that way too, and he said yes. That's when she realized just how ancient he might be. Still, she admitted she didn't trust him. She knew nothing about who he really was. When she asked his real name or purpose, he only said, "I'm a great wizard." That's it. Athanasia called him impossible and muttered that maybe she should have asked Duke Alpheuse's son to teach her instead. Lucas raised an eyebrow and coolly replied, "Oh, really?" She compared the boy favorably nicer, more patient, not arrogant like Lucas. Amused, Lucas teased her, saying it sounded like she wanted to be friends with the boy. Before she could argue, he suddenly laughed and teleported her into the sky. Athanasia screamed as she plummeted, completely blanking on how to use magic. just before she hit the ground. A young boy caught her. Ezekiel, Duke Alpheus's son. Flustered, she apologized, but he just stared at her and asked if she was an angel. Caught off guard, she nervously said yes. But Ezekiel quickly noticed her bright blue eyes, the signature of the royal family, and realized who she really was. Still, he politely called her Lady Angel and asked why she fell from the sky. Before she could explain, his father appeared. Athanasia hid while the Duke scolded Ezekiel for wandering off. The Duke reminded him of his upcoming studies abroad, while Ezekiel worried about leaving his sister, Janet. His father dismissed his concerns, saying family duty came first and hinting that if the princess had liked him, he wouldn't have to leave at all. Hidden nearby, Athanasia realized this was all part of the Duke's plan. After his father left, Athanasia stepped out and asked if Ezekiel was okay. Though he smiled and said he was fine, she could see the sadness in his eyes. She decided to stay a little longer and listen. Sitting together under the quiet sky, Ezekiel admitted he felt trapped by his responsibilities. Being the heir wasn't freedom, it was a cage. Athanasia sympathized, then joked that he should just finish his studies quickly and prove his father wrong. He laughed for real this time, saying she was right, his father's coldness was just tough love. Hearing that, she smiled, admiring his resolve. But before she could say anything more, a magic circle flared under her feet and poof, she was teleported back home. Lucas stood there smirking, saying she looked like she'd had fun and was probably about to stay for dinner. Furious, Athanasia slapped him hard. He blinked, asking what that was for, and she shouted that it was for everything, sending her off without warning, yanking her back, and doing whatever he wanted without caring about her feelings. Lucas casually replied, "Didn't you want to be friends with Snowy's son?" Which only made her angrier. She yelled that he never listened, never helped, and always acted like an annoying know-it-all. On top of that, she didn't even get to say goodbye to Ezekiel. Now he probably thought she just vanished like a rude ghost. Lucas frowned, clearly unimpressed, and began casting another spell. "If it bothers you that much," he said coolly, "you can always go back and explain yourself." Before he could finish, Athanasia snapped, yelling for him not to make things even more complicated. Fed up, she turned away and muttered that she couldn't stand being around him another second. Athanasia, fuming, stormed out of the room. Lily called after her that dinner was almost ready, but she ignored her and kept walking. As she crossed the quiet garden, her anger burned hotter. She swore she wouldn't speak to Lucas ever again. Reaching the lake, she collapsed onto the grass, frustration melting into despair. 2 whole weeks had passed, and she still couldn't use any new magic. Lucas's cryptic words, "acquire it yourself," echoed in her mind, and a chill ran through her. What if her dreams were starting to come true? A soft voice echoed from the lake, freezing Athanasia in place. It was her mother's. The rippling water formed her mother's smiling face, telling her it was okay if she couldn't use magic. Hope filled Athanasia's heart as she reached out, but the image vanished like mist. Suddenly, the lake pulled her under. Tangled roots from the dream lotus wrapped around her legs, dragging her into the cold depths. Sensing the magical disturbance, Lucas teleported to the source. Beneath the water, Athanasia struggled for air, remembering his words, "Magic is the act of using your own energy to command the elements to make them one with your will." Focusing with all her strength, she released a surge of power that formed a massive droplet, lifting her from the lake. Lucas arrived just in time to see her rise. Gasping but glowing with pride, she had used real magic, her own. Lucas feigned indifference. "I wasn't coming to save you. I was just passing by." Catching her breath, Athanasia smiled brightly and thanked him, asking if he'd keep teaching her. He nodded, pretending to be bored but clearly agreeing. As they walked back under the moonlight, Lucas broke the silence. "You really had the nerve to punch me, huh? Brave for someone your size." Athanasia grinned. "What, planning to hit me back?" He sighed. "No, I don't fight children," she smirked. "Funny, you don't look that much older than me." When they reached the palace, Lily hurried over, worried. Athanasia claimed she'd just been lying on the grass, only for her father's voice to sound behind her. "Just lying on the grass, was it?" Felix appeared, eyeing them suspiciously. And what kind of magic practice was this? Before Athanasia could respond, He grabbed Lucas by the collar and picked her up with his other hand. A scene the maids would surely gossip about for days. As Athanasia chanted, a teacup floated smoothly into her hand. Delighted, she looked to Lucas, who nodded approvingly though he credited his own teaching. When she teased that she'd worked hard too, he decided to show off, raising everything around them into the air. Startled, Athanasia yelled for him to stop, and with a flick, everything including her crashed down. Smugly, Lucas asked if she was impressed. Half annoyed, she admitted he was amazing. Then he sipped from a teacup hers and she demanded it back. Later, frustrated with her slow progress, Athanasia decided to ask Akil for help and realized she'd never said goodbye to him properly. When she asked Lucas to send her to the Duke's mansion, he teased, "You sure it's help you want, not the Duke's son?" She rolled her eyes, but he refused, claiming his mana was too valuable. When she pointed out his recent magic display, he reminded her she'd scolded him last time. So she flattered him, calling him the most powerful and handsome mage alive until he sighed and cast the spell. Unfortunately, she appeared high above the Duke's mansion and fell straight down the chimney. A log then hit her head. Akil was staring in shock. Trying to play it cool, she greeted him, saying she'd come to bother him again. He chuckled that she always found new ways to surprise him and helped her out of the fireplace. When she joked about being a fairy tale angel, he dryly replied, "I've never heard of one that enters through chimneys." As he brushed ashes from her dress, she noticed his gentle warmth. When he commented that her eyes looked different, she froze, remembering Lucas had changed them to his garnet hue, and quickly told him to stop staring. Then, when Akil asked why she'd come, she admitted she hadn't said goodbye. Smiling, he said he was glad to see her again. He'd even wished for it that morning, making her blush. Noticing his packed bags, she asked about them. He said he was leaving for Atlanta in 2 days to study. The name made her heart sink. Atlanta was far away, far from the peaceful life fate had planned for him. As she stepped back, she tripped over a book, but Akil caught her. When she tried to pick it up, he stopped her gently. Watching him, Athanasia realized how much he'd changed, already becoming the man fate intended him to be. Just then, someone knocked. It was Jeanette. Akil greeted her warmly. She offered to help him clean, then invited him to the greenhouse to see the roses. Athanasia quietly observed, her heart tightening at how natural they seemed together. Jeanette was every bit the gentle, radiant girl Athanasia had seen in her dreams, the one destined to be loved by everyone. As Athanasia turned away, a voice suddenly spoke behind her. It was Lucas. Startled, she asked when he'd appeared. Ignoring her panic, he asked who the other person was. "You mean Akil?" she asked. "No," Lucas replied calmly. "The girl, Jeanette. Tell me, is she a chimera?" Athanasia blinked, confused. Lucas explained, "A chimera is a child changed through black magic." Meanwhile, in the greenhouse, Jeanette cheerfully took Akil's hand, pulling him along to show him something. Lucas and Athanasia secretly followed, hidden by a magical shroud. When Athanasia whispered, asking what he was doing, Lucas replied, observing. "Don't interrupt." Watching Jeanette laugh with Akil, he frowned. "No matter how I look at her," he murmured, "her mana isn't purely royal. There's something else in it, something dark, a trace of black magic." Athanasia instantly snapped, saying Lucas was going too far. He just smirked, clearly enjoying himself, and teased her for defending Jeanette so fiercely. Then, raising an eyebrow, he pointed out that Jeanette also had the blue eyes of the royal family and slyly asked if she was Athanasia's sister. Athanasia froze, stammering that she didn't know. Lucas didn't seem to care. He simply turned away and said they should keep following. Fuming, Athanasia called after him, accusing him of being a stalker, and ran to stop whatever nonsense he had planned next. Up in the greenhouse, Akil smiled softly and asked Jeanette what song she wanted to hear. She beamed, saying she loved anything he played. With a calm nod, he sat down at the piano, his fingers gliding over the keys as a gentle melody filled the room. Meanwhile, Athanasia and Lucas were still sneaking closer. Athanasia whispered that they should leave, this was too private, but of course, Lucas ignored her completely, curiosity written all over his face. As the music flowed, Jeanette's smile slowly faded. Without realizing it, tears slipped down her cheeks. From a distance, Athanasia gasped Jeanette was crying. Akil noticed immediately, stopping mid-song, concern flashing in his eyes. Jeanette quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed, saying she didn't mean to cry, she just wanted to hear him play. Akil smiled softly, promising he'd play again, but Jeanette shook her head and said she wanted to hear him play forever. With a sigh, Akil told her that his father wanted him to study abroad. Jeanette's face fell. She begged him to let her talk to the Duke so he could stay, but Akil gently said it was his own choice, he wanted to go. Her voice trembled as she asked why, reminding him that he always listened to her and that he loved her most. Akil stood and hugged her gently, saying this time was different. Jeanette burst into tears, saying he was the only one who cared for her and that if he left, she'd be all alone. Akil promised he'd write to her, but she only cried harder, clinging to him as he whispered an apology. Watching them from the shadows, Athanasia felt her chest tighten. Jeanette's pain reminded her too much of her own lonely dreams where her father always turned away no matter how hard she cried. Both she and Jeanette had grown up without warmth, both longing for someone who would stay. For reasons she couldn't explain, Athanasia suddenly wanted to see her father. Lucas, standing beside her, glanced down and murmured, "She must have seen the future." Athanasia frowned, snapping that not even her father could do that and accusing Lucas of spouting nonsense. But he only smirked, saying Jeanette wasn't an ordinary child. Before she could question him, he turned to leave, saying they were done here. Athanasia hurried after him, taking one last look back and whispering a silent goodbye to Akil and Jeanette. Back at the palace, the king and Felix were strolling through the royal garden when Athanasia came running, calling for her father. He turned just in time for her to leap into his arms, saying how much she'd missed him. Amused, he teased that she always appeared whenever she pleased, lifting her with ease. Felix chuckled that she was extra lively today, almost like Raven. Athanasia giggled, asking if she was just as adorable. Felix declared she was the cutest in the entire continent, earning a sharp glare from the king, who warned him not to spoil her and to keep 10 feet away. As they walked, the king asked why she'd come. Athanasia said she'd been busy studying magic and missed him. When he asked if it was tiring, she admitted it was but said she wouldn't give up. Smiling, he praised her determination, saying he'd thought she'd quit once it got hard but admired her resolve. He told her to keep going and never give up. Looking up, Athanasia softly asked if he'd always love her. Surprised, he asked why, and she said she just wanted to hear it. Without hesitation, he promised he would. Her face brightened. "Then it's a promise," she said. "Things will always stay this way." That night, Athanasia lay in bed flipping through her hand-drawn picture book of magical worlds, realizing how much had changed. Her father no longer rejected her. Akil wasn't as cold as she'd thought, and Jeanette only wanted love. Maybe her dreams had made her see too narrowly. Meanwhile, Lucas sat alone on the rooftop, gazing at the stars with a faint smile. He could feel fate shifting and wondered how far the little princess would go in rewriting the future once set in stone. Now, at the age of 14, Athanasia has reached the most important age in Oilia, the year when every young noble attends their first grand ball and performs their first public dance. Her big day is fast approaching, and she's practicing hard. Her dance teacher praises her grace, calling her a fairy on her feet. Athanasia laughs it off, but the teacher reminds her that the ball is only a month away and that she must soon choose a partner worthy of her status. Later in her room, Athanasia sits surrounded by portraits of potential dance partners, completely stumped. She didn't expect her birthday to feel so complicated. Her father has always gone all out for her birthday's jewels, gowns, even her own private library built just for her, but never his presents. Not once has he attended a single birthday, and deep down she knows why. Her birthday is also the anniversary of her mother's death. As she's lost in thought, Lucas suddenly appears, teasing her about her sparkling collection of partner options. She brushes him off, frustrated that none of them compare to a certain someone. Lucas smirks, saying he knows exactly what's bothering her. She wants her father to be with her on her birthday. He tells her to just ask him directly. Athanasia goes quiet, then softly asks him to leave. The next day, she sits with her father for tea. He asks about her dance practice and partner choice, offering to select one for her if she can't decide. Athanasia quickly declines she'll choose herself. Then he asks if she has any birthday wishes. She hesitates, remembering Lucas's words, and finally gathers the courage to ask, "Could you spend my birthday with me this year?" Silence. Her father doesn't reply. Instead, he asks if there's anything else she'd like. Realizing how hopeless it sounds, Athanasia apologizes and says she's already grateful for the time they spend together, then excuses herself. Outside, Felix joins her and assures her she wasn't selfish, it's normal to want her father there. But he explains that the Emperor has made it a habit to lock himself away every year on that day. Trying to lighten the mood, he asks if she's picked a dance partner. Athanasia jokes, asking if he'd like to dance with her. Felix freezes, flustered, insisting she deserves someone far better. She teases him a little before returning to her room. Later, her maid Lillian hints that maybe Felix meant something else, perhaps the Emperor himself wants to dance with her. Athanasia is stunned. Traditionally, parents leading the first dance had fallen out of fashion, but the thought warms her heart. She recalls her father's words about her partner's reputation and suddenly realizes he wanted to dance with her all along. Determined, Athanasia begins to practice harder. When she stumbles, Lucas catches her mid-fall, joking that she should have protected herself with magic. She snaps back that she doesn't need his help. Seeing her injured feet, he heals them and apologizes for not understanding her feelings earlier. She's surprised by his sincerity, but forgives him on one condition: he has to help her practice dancing. Lucas agrees, and when Lillian sees them together, she's thrilled and rushes off to spread the news. Athanasia gets embarrassed, while Lucas just laughs. He tells her she should take a page out of his book and listen to her heart. She's smart enough to know what it's saying. The next day, they begin a new lesson. Lucas announces that today's test will be about advanced magic theory and warns her to focus. Athanasia finishes it in record time, leaving him stunned. After that, Felix invites Athanasia to take a stroll in the garden, but she politely refuses, saying she'll go next time. Both Felix and Lillian notice she's been acting strangely busy, quiet, and secretive. Even her father feels the distance as Athanasia stops visiting him, and it begins to weigh on his heart. Meanwhile, we see her working on something mysterious in her room, sketching away with full concentration. The next day, Athanasia finally visits her father and apologizes for not coming sooner. He brushes it off, saying, "It's fine. I wasn't doing anything anyway." As they sit together, she smiles and says she loves talking with him. Claude looks at her and says softly, "I haven't seen you at tea lately. I almost thought you didn't want to see me." Athanasia quickly replies, "Actually, I was preparing a very special gift for you, father." Claude frowns slightly. "You don't have to give me anything." But Athanasia insists, "You've given me so many birthday surprises over the years, and each one made me so happy. This year, I want to return the favor." Felix blinks. "Wait, you want to give a gift on your birthday instead of receiving one?" Athanasia grins. "There's no law in Obelia that says I can't." Felix laughs and agrees. "You're absolutely right." Claude chuckles too. "You've always been one of a kind. So, what did you make?" She proudly presents a painting she drew herself. Even with all the beautiful paintings in the palace, something always felt missing. "So, I made this for you. I hope you like it." Felix looks amazed. "So that's why you've been hiding in your room all this time, working tirelessly and even using magical dye?" Athanasia nods. "Yes, I want this painting to last forever." Claude's expression softens. "You've had dance practice, studies, and yet you still found time to paint. You really are diligent." Athanasia looks at him warmly. "You've always wished for my happiness, father. So I hope this gift brings you a little happiness too. And at the ball, I'd like to grant your birthday wish. Will you be my partner for the first dance?" The scene shifts to her birthday celebration. Servants gather around, smiling and saying, "Happy 14th birthday, Your Highness." She thanks them all, invites them to enjoy cake, and shares the moment with pure joy. Later, back in her room, she sighs happily. Today was such a wonderful day. Then Lucas appears, fashionably late. She teases him. "You're late. Where's my birthday gift? Don't tell me it's another crow." Lucas smirks. I'm a great magician, not a free one. Now close your eyes and count to 3. She does, and when she opens them, glowing bubbles of light float in the air like magic fireworks. Athanasia gasps in awe. Lucas grins. So? Impressed? She smiles brightly. Thank you, Lucas. It's beautiful. As she watches the lights fade, Athanasia thinks to herself, so much has changed over the years. I've met so many kind people, and I'm truly grateful. I can finally say, I'm happy. I just wish I could share this happiness with my father, too. The episode closes with Claude sitting alone, gazing at Athanasia's painting. He remembers her saying, "You don't have to do that." And her heartfelt reply, "Why not? I'm your daughter. I want to do something for you too." His expression softens as another memory surfaces, little Athanasia once saying, "My mother and I will always be by your side." And with that touching memory, the episode ends. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story. Son of Obelia and its precious pearl. The nobles applaud loudly, then immediately start whispering. They gush over Jeanette's beauty and elegance while comparing poor Athanasia to a plain wall. They even complain that she isn't being presented and that the emperor barely acknowledges her. Athanasia hears every single word and desperately wishes her father would just look her way. But before her heart can break any further, she wakes up, gasping, just another nightmare. While practicing her dance steps, she tries to follow the instructor's advice to move with rhythm and balance, and then instantly falls over. The instructor worries she looks painfully tired and reminds her that nobles from all over the empire will attend her debut. The emperor is expecting great things, so she must perform perfectly. Athanasia agrees. This day is important to her, too. If Jeanette shows up, the emperor will finally realize he has more than one daughter. She remembers asking him to be her first dance partner, and how he never answered, so she forces herself to keep practicing even though she's exhausted. The maids whisper among themselves, scared she's pushing her body too hard. When they report to Lily, she immediately realizes Athie must be anxiously waiting for the emperor's reply. Just then, a maid rushes in with news from the Garnet Palace. A few minutes later, Athanasia hears the announcement herself. The emperor will be her escort and dance partner. She freezes in shock before relief washes over her. Her dress and accessories have arrived too, so she excitedly gets ready to try them on. Later, she finds Lucas lying on a sofa like a lazy cat. She offers him sweets and praises him as the greatest wizard alive, instantly making him suspicious. When she finally admits she wants him to turn into his adult form to practice dancing, Lucas refuses immediately. He reminds her how she stepped on his feet over and over last time. She insists she's improved, but he just waves a hand and creates a flimsy paper golem, telling her to dance with that because he's busy breathing. Athanasia grabs the paper doll's hand and nearly screams it looks like a cursed arts and crafts project. Lucas teases her to be careful not to hurt its feelings. When she begs him to at least make it move like a real person, he says he could, but absolutely will not. She tries anyway and ends up stepping on the doll, falling and collapsing with it. Lucas bursts out laughing, saying she looks like she's scrubbing the floor. She mutters that she should have asked Felix, and Lucas quickly warns her that the emperor ordered Felix to stay 10 feet away from her for safety. Annoyed, Athie insists she won't step on his feet anymore, but he still refuses. She sighs and wonders who else could help. Then she remembers hearing that Agekeel recently returned. She thinks about how the entire Alphuse family is preparing to present Jeanette at the ball. Lucas casually mentions that Agekeel graduated top of his class at Arlanta. When he notices her curiosity, he smirks. She admits she wonders how much he's changed after 7 years. Lucas shrugs and tells her to go see him, then, without warning, teleports her straight into the sky above Alphuse territory. She plummets downward screaming, but Agekeel catches her just in time. He's shocked yet happy to see her after so many years. She's surprised he looks so different, but he says he recognized her immediately. Then Jeanette's voice calls for her brother. Athanasia tells him to go, but he takes her hand instead and pulls her along, saying he doesn't want her disappearing again. He leads her to a quiet flower-covered field, his secret place. He explains that he comes here whenever he wants to be alone and asks if she likes it. Athanasia admits it's beautiful. Agekiel then reveals something unexpected. Ever since their first meeting 7 years ago, he has visited this spot every single day. Even while studying abroad, he returned twice a year without fail, though he can't explain why their brief meeting affected him so deeply. To change the subject, Athanasia asks about his time in Arlanta. He explains that at first it was rough. Other students whispered that he was just an Obelian duke's son with no real skill. Even though he studied Arlantian in advance, everything fell apart when he tried to use it, and people mocked him. So he worked twice as hard to keep up. On graduation, he finished early, earned top honors, and was even encouraged to stay and continue studying, but he needed to return home to eventually take over his family's house. As they walk, Athanasia tells him he's amazing. He explains that as the heir, he must avoid bringing shame to his family. She's surprised because he always seemed so relaxed. She realizes he also carries heavy burdens just like everyone else, and she reminds herself that she must try her best too. Akil finally admits there was one more reason he worked so hard. He gently tucks a flower into Athanasia's hair and says he didn't want a certain someone to slip out of his reach while he was away from Oilia. Before she can even process that line, a teleportation spell suddenly kicks in. As she starts floating upward, Akil panics and asks if she's leaving him again, promising that next time he will come to her instead. Athanasia thinks about him for a brief moment, then poof, she vanishes and drops straight back into her room. Lucas is waiting there, looking like someone stole his snacks. Frustrated, Athanasia complains about being tossed around like a magical parcel. Though honestly, she's a little relieved because that moment with Akil had her heart doing backflips. She asks Lucas if he's angry, and he casually says he's just in a bad mood. She protests that she should be the one upset, but Lucas just walks up, flicks her forehead, and strolls away saying he feels better now. Athanasia is left staring at him like he's a very confusing puzzle. That afternoon, she practices her dance steps again. The instructor reminds her not to lose focus and cheers when she completes the routine perfectly. He tells her dancing is spot on today and begs her to keep the same energy at tomorrow's debutante ball. Later that night, Athanasia sits quietly and asks Lily if people will accept her as a princess at the ball. Lily smiles warmly and tells her everyone will be enchanted the moment they see her. As Lily fixes her hair, Athanasia admits she's nervous, but Lily's calm presence makes her worries softer. Lily reminds her to sit still so her hair doesn't tangle, and then starts reminiscing how tiny she used to be and how she's grown into a beautiful young lady. Athanasia blushes and asks why Lily is suddenly showering her with compliments. Lily explains that Athanasia deserves it. She studied difficult books, practiced magic until even Lucas admitted her progress, and took every dance lesson seriously. Athanasia says Lily is overpraising, but Lily insists she's genuinely proud. She pats Athanasia's head and says the Emperor must feel the same, so there's nothing to worry about. Athanasia thanks her. Lily reminds her tomorrow will be a big day and urges her to rest before leaving the room. Alone in bed, Athanasia thinks about the ball and how the Emperor her father will share her first dance. It's something that never happened in the future she once saw. She wonders if all her effort might finally change her fate, and if she can become a daughter he can proudly claim. She decides she'll give her very best tomorrow. And with that thought, she falls asleep holding on to a quiet, hopeful feeling that maybe, finally, everything she has done up to this moment will change the destiny she once feared. The day of Athanasia's debut ball finally arrives, and her room basically turns into a beauty parlor battlefield. From early morning, maids rush around with perfumes, oils, brushes, and anything shiny enough to make a princess glow. The ball won't start until the afternoon, but everyone acts like it begins in 5 minutes. Athanasia gets hungry and restless, but Lily stays laser-focused, insisting they still have more beauty treatments to finish. After her bath, Lily brushes her hair while other maids scramble for makeup and accessories like they're competing in some Royal Olympics. Her dress is ironed, her accessories triple-checked, and the room is pure chaos. Watching them, Athanasia finally realizes debut balls are way more exhausting than they look. Later, Emperor Claude arrives in a royal carriage with Felix. Athanasia steps out, and Felix practically stops breathing. She looks that stunning. She notices this is the first time she's seen her father fully dressed up outside official duties, and it surprises her enough to make her smile. Claude offers his hand like a true gentleman, and she takes it, happy he came to escort her. As night falls and the ballroom fills with guests from across the kingdom, Athanasia prepares to enter. But all the voices and staring eyes make her nervous memories from her dreams creep in. Claude instantly notices her tense expression. She tries to pretend she's fine, but he knows better. He even jokes about making everyone keep their heads lowered, which scares the soldiers nearby. Athanasia quickly refuses and assures him she'll be fine as long as he's beside her. Claude accepts that, and she manages a calm smile. Elsewhere, Jeanette waits anxiously. Duke Alpheus enters and tells her the ball is starting soon. She asks if she'll really meet her father and sister today. He promises he'll choose the perfect moment to bring her back into the imperial family. She thanks him with watery eyes, and he tells her to simply wait. Back in the ballroom, Athanasia enters with Claude, and instantly the whole atmosphere changes. Guests whisper, swoon, and stare. Some can't take their eyes off the emperor's regal presence. Others are mesmerized by Athanasia's beauty. She waves gently, keeping her calm princess composure. At the center of the ballroom, she and Claude bow and start the ceremonial dance. She remembers her instructor's praise, but nerves strike, and she accidentally steps on Claude's foot. He doesn't react at all, like his feet are made of steel. Guests murmur about how elegant the pair looks, like a picture come alive. Claude quietly teases her about the misstep, but then reassures her to just follow his lead. She focuses and the dance finishes beautifully. Claude praises her and sends her off to enjoy the evening. While chatting with girls her age, Athanasia spots Duke Alpheus and wonders if he's planning something. Memories from her dreams return, especially the moment he introduced Jeanette in front of everyone. Before she can worry more, several boys ask her for a dance. Overwhelmed, she steps back right into someone behind her. It's Aijkiel. He steadies her, politely tells the other nobles she already promised him the next dance, and they instantly scatter. Athanasia accepts his invitation, and they glide across the ballroom. Up on the balcony, Claude watches closely. Duke Alpheus walks over, complimenting the Empire and Athanasia's radiance. He even hints that she could use a friend her age, his foster daughter. Claude shuts that idea down immediately. Alpheus backs off with a smile, but Claude isn't fooled. When Athanasia and Aijkiel finish their dance, he bows and leaves. Athanasia looks up at the balcony, wondering if Jeanette is somewhere nearby. Determined, she steps forward and calls for everyone's attention. She announces a special gift for the son of Obelia. With a graceful gesture, she casts a spell. The ceiling disappears into a starry sky, and a magical image of a living person appears above the ballroom. Claude's expression changes instantly. He recognizes the figure. The entire ballroom gasps when Athanasia's illusion finishes forming, because standing right there in glowing starlight is Empress Diana. The guests stare in pure disbelief. Even the best mages in the Empire can't pull off something this impressive, yet here's Athanasia casually doing it like it's a party trick. She moves to the piano and starts playing softly. Claude steps forward, takes the hand of the illusion, and begins dancing with the magical image of the woman he once loved. Athanasia gives him a tiny, encouraging nod. When the dance ends, the crowd explodes into applause. Athanasia explains that she wanted her parents to share this moment together, and that creating it made her truly happy. Then she blesses the entire hall, earning even louder cheers. The nobles whisper excitedly, saying her magic is beyond exceptional, definitely worthy of a future heir. While fireworks burst outside, Duke Alpheus quietly slips away. Jeanette watches the colors from a window, thinking the ball must be ending. Her heart fills with hope. Maybe tonight she'll finally meet her father and younger sister. Meanwhile, Claude and Athanasia ride home in the carriage. Claude gives her a small gift, praising how composed and impressive she was throughout the night. Even though it's late, he wishes her a happy birthday. Athanasia remembers telling him once that she wanted him to be the first to congratulate her, but she laughs, realizing plenty of people beat him to it this year. Claude responds with his usual dry tone, and when he lightly hints she could give the gift back, she hugs it protectively. No chance she's letting it go now. Elsewhere, Alpheus stands in his room, staring out the window when a masked man appears. The stranger notes that the night didn't go as planned. Alpheus admits the Emperor is still far too careful. When the masked man suggests Alpheus might be out of moves, Alpheus snaps back, demanding to know why he showed up at the ball. If anyone had seen him, their whole plan could have fallen apart. The masked man claims he has everything under control, but a knock at the door makes him vanish instantly. Jeanette enters, and Alpheus explains that Athanasia drew all the attention tonight, leaving the Emperor in no mood to acknowledge another daughter. He tells Jeanette to be patient. She replies gently, saying she still believes she'll meet her father and sister someday. Back at the palace, Athanasia sits on her bed and opens Claude's gift. Inside is a beautiful ribbon and a simple letter. His message wishing her eternal happiness warms her heart, and she holds the gift close, smiling. The ball went great, everything was perfect. Athanasia looked amazing, but her mind just wouldn't calm down. She kept worrying about that conversation between Alpheus and his father. Even though Jeanette wasn't introduced at the ball, Athanasia still couldn't relax. Restless, she steps onto the balcony and gazes up at the moon. Lucas suddenly descends, landing much closer than she expects. Startled, she faces him as he studies her expression, relieved she isn't crying but noticing she still looks troubled. He asks what happened at the ball. She says nothing. Not believing her, he assumes her father scolded her. When she snaps in annoyance, he immediately switches theories she must have danced with someone. She hesitates, and he instantly jumps to the conclusion that she stepped on their foot. Her growing annoyance only confirms it for him, and he bursts into laughter. Athanasia fumes, trying to explain she was only nervous. But before she can finish, a sharp pain strikes her chest. Her vision blurs, and she nearly collapses. Lucas reacts instantly, catching her and urging her to breathe. He explains that her emotions spiked too suddenly, causing her magic to overflow. As she slowly regains control, she admits she doesn't understand why her power feels so unstable. Lucas answers bluntly, she's too weak, and training starts tomorrow. Before she can protest, he ignores her and lifts her with magic, carrying her back inside. He lays her gently on the bed and tells her to rest. As she drifts off, she quietly wonders if he came because he was worried. She wishes him good night, and he gives a short reply. Once she's asleep, Lucas stands beside her, watching. He notes that his magic had only just recovered, yet he used it again because of her. He calls her a weakling in his mind and wonders what she would do if he wasn't around. His thoughts split in two. One voice complains that taking care of her is annoying, a waste of his magic, he has no duty to save anyone. The other voice argues that Athanasia wouldn't survive without him, and that they're friends whether he wants to admit it or not. The first voice refuses to accept that. The second calmly insists he already knows the truth, he just doesn't want to acknowledge it. The argument grows louder in his mind until he finally sighs and clears his thoughts. In the end, he decides it doesn't matter. When Athanasia murmurs in her sleep, he gently uses magic to calm her. He stays beside her a little longer, thinking it's pleasant, and staying briefly shouldn't hurt. The next morning, Athanasia wakes to a mountain of invitations. Lily excitedly explains that nobles throughout the empire are inviting her to parties. Athanasia reads one, surprised, and Lily asks which she'll accept first, mentioning that Marquis' son is handsome and well regarded. When Athanasia asks for advice, Lily tells her that if she only wants to make friends, she doesn't need to overthink things. But Athanasia hesitates. She has never left the palace before. Unsure whether she should, she decides to ask her father. While riding a boat with him later, she brings up the invitations. Claude immediately refuses without a moment's thought. His quick answer stuns her. He remembers the young nobles surrounding her at the debut and becomes irritated just recalling it. He repeats that his refusal stands. Parties only attract unwanted attention. After a short silence, Claude remarks that their little outing was unexpected. Athanasia says the weather is nice and an occasional outing should be allowed. He brings up the time she fell into the water as a child, though she barely remembers it and only recalls that he used to frighten her back then. Then she spots a dream lotus nearby and asks to see it up close. Her plan is simple. If he relaxes while looking at the flowers, maybe she can ask again about leaving the palace grounds. Claude notes her strange taste, but still uses magic to pull the dream lotus toward them. He restrains it so she can observe it, but the sight of the wriggling tentacles terrifies her. She clings to him, begging him to take it away. Before they can regain their balance, the boat tips and they fall into the water together. Claude carries her to shore. Athanasia feels humiliated he had to save her again. And not only did she fail in her plan, she ended up scolded and assigned additional guards for her carelessness. Wanting a change of pace, she goes to the kitchen. Lily reminds her she doesn't need to help there. When Lily asks which party she'll attend, Athanasia sighs. Her father is so overprotective he even banned her from leaving the palace after she fell into the lake earlier. Felix appears, looking for her. She jokes about him taking her away from the palace, and he panics until she reassures him she's kidding. He tells her the Emperor has prepared a gift for her and asks her to follow him. He leads her to a garden filled with roses one Claude has been preparing for years, knowing she loved them. It's breathtaking. Felix adds that she can use the garden however she wants, even hosting a tea party there. Lily mentions that the Emperor knows she wants to make friends. Athanasia brightens and begins thinking about whom to invite. After finishing her invitations, Hannah eagerly takes them to be sent out. One of the invitations reaches Jeanette, who lights up with excitement. When Jeanette arrives at the palace, she's overwhelmed by its size and beauty. The empty surroundings make her wonder if she's lost until a sharp voice demands to know who she is. Emperor Claude stands before her. Jeanette explains nervously that she was invited, but Claude brushes off her name, saying she's lucky if she weren't Athanasia's guest, she wouldn't have left unharmed. His cold tone frightens her. Once he leaves, a guard warns her not to wander without permission. Jeanette, shaken, convinces herself that once her father learns the truth, he'll treat her well again. The ladies talk excitedly about the debut ball and how intimidating yet impressive the Emperor is. One mentions how beautiful the garden is and how Athanasia looked like a fairy tale princess. Another lady gushes about Felix, calling him the Blood Red Knight. Athanasia is stunned, she never knew Felix had such a nickname. Then someone brings up the genius wizard, who always accompanies her. The girl describes him with dramatic flare dark hair, crimson eyes, and the grief-filled gaze of a wolf. Athanasia smiles privately at the comparison to a wolf. Finally, the girls begin teasing her about the young man from House Alfuse who danced with her. Athanasia freezes, unsure how to respond. Sensing her discomfort, Jeanette smoothly steps in, explaining that Agil had simply been honored to dance with the princess. The ladies immediately surround Jeanette, excited to meet Agil's second cousin and eager for stories. Athanasia slips away, tired but grateful, remembering her dream where Jeanette asked for palace guidance and wished for a family. Jeanette soon checks on her, worried she's bored. Athanasia explains it's just her first tea party, and she's not used to crowds. She also admits she fears people might find her dull. Jeanette reassures her, says she wants to be friends, and invites her over, sparking two nearby guests to fight over who gets to invite Athanasia next. After the party, Athanasia returns happily to her room and finds Lucas asleep on the sofa. She studies him, admitting he's handsome despite his terrible personality. Lucas suddenly wakes, teases her, then removes a dark aura from her before going back to sleep. Annoyed, she assumes he's messing with her. Meanwhile, Lucas remembers seeing the same dark energy on Claude. The aura on Athanasia wasn't a mistake, it was black magic, and he wonders where it came from. The scene opens in Lucas's old tower, where a mysterious guy who looks suspiciously like Cloud, but with black hair, is setting up a strange gift meant for the princess. After preparing it, he disappears. Back in the palace library, Athanasia is looking for books. She mentions that Janet and Elena love night-themed poems. Suddenly, Ezekiel walks in, acting innocent and pretending he didn't know it was her private library. Athanasia jokes that she should kick him out for trespassing, but Ezekiel fires back, reminding her that she showed up at his house dozens of times without permission. And he's not wrong. that shuts her down instantly, calling her Miss Angel. Ezekiel apologizes politely and says he'll gladly accept any punishment. He also admits he's happy just to see the girl who keeps invading his thoughts and asks if he can stay by her side. Right as he tries to get closer, Lucas appears like a wolf guarding his territory. He tells Ezekiel it is a problem and that the Emperor wouldn't allow him inside Athanasia's private library. Ezekiel snaps back, asking if Lucas, a magician, even has permission to be here. Lucas coldly says he serves the imperial family and asks if Ezekiel thinks he has the right to question him. Athanasia watches in disbelief as the charming sunshine boy and the lone wolf sorcerer stare each other down. She interrupts, reminding them she exists. She explains that Lucas actually does have permission to enter freely. Ezekiel then realizes Lucas is the mage who was chosen over him years ago. Lucas proudly confirms this, saying he found the library books quite interesting and hopes they meet again. Athanasia just sighs as Lucas gives Ezekiel the deadliest side eye ever. Lucas picks up the book he lent Athanasia and teases her for reading a romance novel. Later, as they walk through the garden, Athanasia scolds Lucas for acting so aggressively. Lucas shrugs it off, he couldn't care less about Ezekiel. Athanasia points out that Ezekiel comes from a wealthy, influential family, but Lucas doesn't care. In fact, she accidentally says Ezekiel is taller. Without missing a beat, Lucas transforms into his true adult form and asks her to repeat who she thinks is taller now. Looking down at her, he smirks and calls her tiny, embarrassing her even more. She yells at him to change back before someone sees him. Athanasia then thinks about what gifts she should get for the girls. Lucas tells her not to bother, but she insists it's important to return kindness, and they are her friends, just like him. Lucas freezes and asks if she thinks they're all equal. Athanasia quickly says no, he's the most important. Lucas immediately powers up with joy, and before she can explain, he grabs her to go gift shopping in the city. He teleports them into an alley and disguises them so they won't attract attention. They enjoy the market, buying food after food, when they suddenly spot Janet at a stall. Curious, Lucas uses magic to listen in. Janet is looking for a satin ribbon to give someone she's grateful to. The seller tells her she'll find it in the magical market, but warns her that it's a dangerous place. Janet, determined, heads there anyway. Athanasia panics and says they should follow her to protect her. When they arrive, the magical market is pure chaos, thieves, scams, shady magic everywhere. Janet enters a jewelry shop, but Lucas senses dark magic and tells Athanasia to stay put. While tracking the strange energy, he feels a huge surge of black magic spreading through the entire city. Inside the shop, Janet meets a man who looks just like Cloud if Cloud had a dark, mysterious twin. He examines the ribbon she wants and says it's perfect for a little sister. Athanasia observes him from afar, wondering who he is. Later, as Janet gets ready to go home, the man announces that the princess's trial begins. The gift he created suddenly bursts into a sphere of dark magic, forming a monstrous beast that lunges at Janet. Athanasia jumps in and saves her just in time. Meanwhile, Lucas sees the explosion and sends his familiar to help Athanasia, but he himself gets trapped by the spreading dark mist. Athanasia holds the beast off until her magic starts running low. She uses a binding spell, telling Janet to run. The ribbon and book Janet bought suddenly glow, making the beast go wild. Athanasia rushes Janet into a safe spot and uses herself as bait. She stumbles and almost gets hit, but then a wolf-like figure Ezekiel charges in and attacks the monster. With the opening he creates, Athanasia summons a magical bow and fires a final arrow, destroying the beast once and for all. Janet checks if she's okay, and Athanasia admits she followed her secretly to protect her, begging Janet not to tell anyone. They seal the promise with a pinky swear. Janet gives her the ribbon she bought as a gift, but it's broken. She apologizes, but Athanasia smiles and says the intention is what matters most. Lucas finally shows up. Athanasia yells at him for disappearing while she was fighting for her life. Lucas scoffs and says she shouldn't brag about beating a low-tier monster. She gets even more annoyed, insisting it was still dangerous. Elsewhere, the mysterious Cloud lookalike watches everything through a magical orb. Staring at the blood-red moon, He says he expected nothing less from Cloud's daughter. The next day, Felix brings Cloud bad news. In recent years, magical beasts have been attacking villages more often, especially during harvest season. They don't just hurt people, they steal food. Because of this, Cloud sends more mages and soldiers to protect the farmers. At the same time, Adonijah is very upset with Lucas. During their trip to the city, everything they bought was paid for using magical coins made by Lucas. These coins disappear after some time, which means the shopkeepers were unknowingly tricked. Lucas doesn't think it's a big deal because it was easy to do, but Adonijah strongly disagrees. She wants to pay everyone back properly. She doesn't know how until Felix arrives with tea, sweets, and cakes. Since Cloud is too busy, Felix spends time with Adonijah instead. He tells her about the monster attacks and how busy her father is sending mages everywhere. Felix also says he's there to help her with anything she needs, so Adonijah admits what happened in the city. In the end, Felix gives her real gold coins and personally takes Adonijah and Lucas back to every shop to repay the money. The shopkeepers aren't angry, just surprised. It's the first time they've ever been paid with magical gold. Everyone is tired afterward. Lucas is annoyed, but Adonijah makes her position clear. She won't allow innocent people to be tricked. Next time, Lucas must pay with real money that he actually earns. She also reminds him that the gold came from Felix, so it must be paid back. This makes Adonijah realize something important: money doesn't come from nowhere. So she decides she wants a job. Since mages are being sent to protect farmers, she asks Felix if she can help too. Felix likes the idea but says they need Cloud's permission. Adonijah doubts her father will agree, but Felix supports her. At first, Cloud refuses and tells her to throw more parties if she's bored. But Adonijah doesn't give up. Felix explains that helping the people would improve her reputation, earn trust, and test her abilities. Cloud finally agrees after Adonijah uses her puppy eyes. He sets strict rules. She must stay close to Felix, obey him, and only go where he allows. He sends her to the Ugulta district, the place where her mother was born. Adonijah packs too much, but Lucas puts everything into a small magic bag. Then Lucas has to leave to deal with dark magic, the same kind that once attacked Adonijah. He doesn't know when he'll return and warns her to stay away from Jeanette. Adonijah looks sad. Lucas thinks she's worried about losing control of her magic, but that's not the reason. She's sad because he's her friend and she doesn't want him to leave. These words mean a lot to Lucas. Long ago, someone told him he would die alone. Hearing this makes him smile. He turns into his adult form and leaves. Adonijah watches him go and quietly calls him an idiot. The journey begins. Felix explains they are close to Ugulta, where a powerful magic barrier protects the land from monsters. Even so, the beasts have become more violent, and Cloud believes someone may be controlling them. They arrive and meet Count Harris, who is in charge of the area. He complains about the monsters and clearly thinks the princess is only there for fun. But when the monsters attack, Adonijah steps forward. This is no longer a game. Now she must prove she has the power, intelligence, and courage to protect the people. She protects everyone while the others focus on defensive magic, and she personally takes down all the monsters. By nightfall, everyone is celebrating. Thanks to the princess and Count Harris, the people are guaranteed a great harvest and can finally celebrate properly. The Count then approaches Adonijah to apologize. He admits he judged her unfairly at first until he saw that she truly carries the power of the imperial family. Through him, Adonijah also learns more about her mother. Diana was born in this very place, and Count Harris was there when Prince Cloud first met her. 16 years ago, Adonijah's uncle, Anastasius, attacked the empire using dark magic, throwing the land into chaos. Monsters destroyed crops, people starved, and everything fell into darkness. When the people needed help the most, Prince Cloud arrived with massive amounts of food, fought the monsters, and protected everyone. That's where he met Diana. She was healing the wounded, helping wherever she could, and at one point, she even danced with the prince. That was their first real connection, and the moment they fell for each other. Eventually, Cloud killed his brother Anastasius, and the Empire of Ovelia finally returned to peace. Adonijah is deeply moved by this story. 16 years later, she returned to the same place to do exactly what her parents once did: protect the people. The villagers now treat her with warmth and respect, and that makes her incredibly happy. But the peace doesn't last. Anastasius secretly enters Adonasia's room and repeats his old trick, placing dark magic on the hair ribbon Cloud gave her. He's clearly planning something dangerous once again. At the same time, Lucas arrives at the source of the dark magic, a tomb. Whose tomb? Anastasius's. Lucas coldly tells him that it's time to stop, because he should remember one simple thing: he's already dead. The next morning, Athanasia wakes up to a loud noise outside. Confused, she asks her maid what's happening, and she's told that today is the harvest festival. The maid even asks if Athanasia would like to go outside. When she looks around, Athanasia sees everyone busy decorating and preparing. Soon, Carrie arrives and informs Athanasia that she is today's special guest. He gestures toward her father, and Athanasia immediately runs over and hugs Claude tightly. Claude then reminds her of a promise she made: she was supposed to send him a daily report before coming here. Athanasia panics internally, realizing she completely forgot because so much has happened. She quickly apologizes, then asks the obvious question: why is he here? Felix explains that today is an important festival and that the king must perform a ritual at the source of magic. Claude then asks Athanasia if she would like to accompany him. Soon after, both the king and the princess are formally introduced to the crowd. This year, Claude and Athanasia will perform the ritual together. They are presented with the first harvest offerings, and the people cheer joyfully, believing this year's crops will be blessed. They travel by carriage until Carrie announces he can go no farther. From this point on, only the king and the princess are allowed to proceed. Everyone else stays behind to wait. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Lucas, who returns to his tower while tracking traces of dark magic. Using his magic mirror, he confirms his suspicion someone is using forbidden black magic. Back with Athanasia and Claude, Claude explains that a great mage once protected this land and saved countless lives. Athanasia briefly thinks of Lucas, who often jokingly calls himself a great mage, but she dismisses the idea because of how unserious he usually seems. Ironically, he truly is that mage. They finally arrive at the source of magic, the birthplace of spirits and life itself. The sight is breathtaking. Athanasia suddenly feels a sharp tightness in her chest as magical energy floats gently around them. Claude warns her not to touch anything, explaining that the sacred tree only responds to pure and sincere hearts. Claude begins the ritual, offering gratitude to the source as the king of Obelia. He asks Athanasia to repeat after him. She introduces herself, presents the harvest offering, and places it before the tree. The tree accepts it, and Athanasia is overjoyed. But then dark magic appears. As Athanasia steps onto the water, the black magic activates. She begins to sink, unable to breathe, while magical plants wrap around her and drag her downward. Claude immediately dives in, using his magic to help her breathe underwater. He manages to save her at least for a moment. Then everything spirals out of control. The trees grow wildly and trap Claude. The magical circle shatters. With no other choice, Claude throws Athanasia upward to safety, sacrificing himself in the process. Athanasia wakes up to see Lucas standing before her. When she asks what he's doing there, he tells her he sensed her danger. Lucas notices the ribbon in Athanasia's hair and immediately realizes it was infused with black magic. He destroys it on the spot, confirming that this entire incident was planned. Panicking, Athanasia asks about her father. Lucas shows her Claude unconscious, trapped, and sealed within powerful magic. Athanasia desperately tries to wake him, but nothing works. Even Lucas admits that his magic is being suppressed here. And that's when Athanasia realizes something is terribly wrong. Athanasia can't stop thinking, why did Dad do that? Why did he trap himself just to save her? Suddenly, Felix's words echo in her mind. He once said that both Claude and Diana loved her deeply. Claude may never show it, but he cares more than anything. And Diana? She loved Athanasia with her whole heart. That's when Athanasia makes up her mind. She tells Lucas that she wants to enter the barrier. Lucas immediately warns her it's extremely dangerous. Because of the magical water, the purification process has already started. If she doesn't bring Claude out before it finishes, both of them could be erased completely. Adanasia doesn't care. She tells Lucas the truth: her father is the only family she has. Nothing else matters. She just wants to save him. Hearing this, Lucas has no words. He stays silent for a moment, then finally agrees to help. Lucas explains that using his magic, he can guide her close to Claude's mind, but she must come back before the purification ends. With no hesitation, Adanasia enters the barrier, looks toward her father, and promises, "No matter what happens, I'll save you." Inside, Adanasia begins floating through Claude's mind, his thoughts, his memories, and the first thing she sees is her mother. Most of Claude's memories revolve around Diana. The festival scene appears again, Diana dancing beautifully, smiling, while Claude can't take his eyes off her. That was the moment he fell in love. That was also the day Claude met Diana, when she introduced herself. As Adanasia runs through the memories trying to reach her father, she's suddenly swept away again. More memories appear, every single one connected to Diana. Even after her death, Claude never forgot her. Adanasia realizes something painful: her father never spoke about her mother, even though Diana filled his entire heart. Then comes the hardest memory. Claude tells Diana that she must not give birth to the baby. Diana refuses. She tells him, "She's our child." Claude replies that Diana matters more to him than anything, because he knows giving birth will kill her. But Diana chooses Adanasia. The moment from episode 1 appears, Adanasia's birth, and right after that, Diana dies. Watching this, Adanasia panics. Claude completely breaks down. He asks why Diana left him alone, and dark magic begins to surround him. Lucas's voice echoes in Adanasia's head, warning her that she's reached the core area and must hurry. Voices overlap, memories of her mother and father collide. Then Adanasia reaches a door. She opens it and sees Claude sitting alone, exhausted and broken. He asks why she keeps appearing in his dreams. Black magic covers his hands as he admits the truth: without Diana, the world feels like a nightmare. He just wants to forget everything. He uses dark magic on himself to erase his emotions. Adanasia desperately tries to stop him. She doesn't want him to forget Diana. She doesn't want him to forget love. But the world around them starts collapsing. Claude says that life without emotions feels empty, yet he believes this is how he was always meant to be. He seals himself inside a barrier once again. Adanasia cries out, telling him this isn't who he is. She begs him to wake up. No matter what, he has to wake up. Cloud refuses to deal with Athanasia or anyone else. He seals away his emotions using dark magic, and Athanasia desperately tries to break through his barrier, but she can't. Time is running out, and even Lucas is struggling to protect her from the outside. To make it worse, another version of Athanasia from an alternate life appears, the one who fell into dark magic just to get closer to her father and ended up exiled. She taunts our Athi, saying her father never loved her and would never care about her again. In that reality, Athanasia once saw a lively party but felt completely alone, so she left the Emerald Palace. She met Cloud, who ignored her, and Felix told her she could join parties once she turned 14. This darker Athanasia keeps tormenting her, saying her father never showed her love and that when she finally turned 14, the kingdom would celebrate a princess, but not her. Instead, it would be Jeanette. We see how badly Athanasia was treated. Even the maids didn't respect her because they thought a princess without magic was useless. At one point, Athanasia tried to win her father's love by giving him chocolates. But before he could try them, Jeanette tasted them first, and that turned into a disaster. The chocolates were mixed with dark magic and a suspicious poison, so Jeanette suffered, and Athanasia ended up facing Claude's rage. He even pushed her off a bridge. Meanwhile, our Athanasia gets trapped by magical lotus vines that tighten around her, draining her strength. She can't save Cloud, and Lucas is struggling to protect her. Suddenly, a bright light shines on Athanasia's forehead, the same place her mother kissed her when she was born. A powerful magic awakens, and Athanasia hears her mother's voice. Diana appears, covers her with kisses, and finally gets to talk to her daughter. Athanasia admits she doesn't have the strength to save her father. Diana apologizes, saying Athanasia has carried a huge burden since she was young and has done amazingly well. She reveals that she sealed Athanasia's powers, and when Athi was pushed off the bridge, Diana used her magic to rewind time and give Athanasia the ability to see her own future so she could change it. Thanks to her, Athi got a second chance. Now Diana tells her she's strong enough to handle her powers, so Athanasia transforms and regains everything. Lucas immediately senses this overwhelming magic. Athanasia then destroys the dark barrier Claude created. She appears like a glowing angel or fairy, depending on your style, pulls Cloud out of the dark void, and brings him back to reality where Lucas protects them both. However, Athanasia and Cloud don't wake up right away. Lucas enters Athi's dream to talk to her. Athanasia suddenly finds herself standing in a beautiful flower garden, totally confused about how she got there. Then a familiar voice speaks from behind, of course, it's Lucas. He explains that waking her up took a lot of magic, so since she was unconscious, he just decided to meet her inside her dreams instead. Still dazed, Athanasia asks the most important question first. Is my father safe? Lucas calmly tells her that Claude has already been sent back to the palace, and even praises her for saving him before everything was purified. But it wasn't easy. Lucas used so much magic that he literally shrunk back into his child form. Athanasia worries, but he reassures her that he'll recover eventually, he just needs some time. However, the bad news is that the danger isn't over yet. Until the real mastermind behind everything is revealed, peace is just wishful thinking. Lucas also opens up for once, admitting that he used to live completely alone in a tower, caring only about magic and not people, until he met Athanasia. She's actually the first person he's ever called a friend. But since he needs more power to protect her, he decides to leave and grow stronger. Before she can stop him, his body breaks apart into shining drops of water and disappears, asking her to wait for him. When Athanasia wakes up in the real world, Felix and Lily are right beside her, relieved out of their minds because she has been unconscious for 10 whole days. She immediately asks about Claude, and their silence already says everything. Claude is still asleep. Athanasia rushes to him, desperate to wake him up. Even though Lily and Felix beg her not to push herself too hard, she pours her magic into him anyway. Slowly, Claude finally opens his eyes, and then wham, he suddenly hits Athanasia. Claude looks at her with cold, unfamiliar eyes and accuses her of being an assassin. He doesn't remember her at all. Back at the Emerald Palace, Athanasia writes down everything that happened. Claude has lost every memory of her, she's basically under house arrest, and he keeps suffering from terrible headaches. Nothing makes sense: the failed ritual, the missing memories, and whoever is secretly pulling the strings. Missing Lucas, she sends out a magic letter, hoping it finds him somehow. Meanwhile, far away in a freezing land covered in snow, Lucas walks alone toward a glowing world tree shining in the icy darkness. His new journey begins, and the future is unknown, but full of possibilities. After some time, Lily comes by and drops a quiet bomb. Raven has been missing ever since the mana outbreak. That hits Athanasia hard, especially after remembering Lucas telling her she's been avoiding Raven. Now she can't help but wonder, why does everyone keep disappearing from her life? Meanwhile, Felix is fighting a losing battle trying to convince Claude that Athanasia is actually his daughter, and that his current illness is the result of trying to save her. Claude, not buying it. To him, this sounds like the world's worst joke that just won't end. He even says that if his brother Anastasius were alive, he'd be laughing at this nonsense. Still, one thing won't leave Claude's mind: Athanasia calling him Dad. As Claude digs through documents, everything strangely lines up: records, Felix's confirmation, even proof that she's his legitimate child. But instead of accepting it, he jumps to another conclusion. Maybe she's some kind of dark magician messing with him. Even when he notices a chair in his office clearly meant just for her, he refuses to believe any of it. On the other side, Athanasia is slowly getting used to her life inside the Emerald Palace. She keeps her expectations low. Survival is still her main goal. But her maids misread her calm attitude as sadness and worry about her. Claude, still stuck in denial mode, comes across a building he doesn't even recognize. Felix casually tells him it's a library built just for Athanasia. At this point, Claude has had enough and decides to check it himself. But when the guards salute him and say they're protecting it for Athanasia's sake, he immediately turns around like, nope, not dealing with this today. Back with Athanasia, she receives a stack of letters from Jeanette, all filled with cheerful updates since she woke up from her 10-day sleep. Reading them actually makes her smile, and she quickly asks Lily for nice paper so she can write back. Later, Claude and Felix pass by a rose garden. Felix mentions that Claude himself once wanted it built. Claude just glares, but Felix stands firm no matter how much he glares, the truth isn't changing. Days pass, and Athanasia and Jeanette keep exchanging letters. But then one message stands out: Jeanette's mother is coming to the capital. And that's bad news, because in the original story, she was someone who plotted against Athanasia. An exhausted Claude finally returns to his room, completely done with Felix's stories. But then he notices a drawing of himself and Athanasia. Instead of feeling anything, he assumes it's some kind of creepy voodoo charm. Perfect finally proof Felix is making things up, right? Not quite. Felix sees the drawing and gets emotional, saying Claude must have treasured it so much that he even preserved it with magic. Claude is stunned. Him cherish something like that? Sounds impossible. But Felix keeps going, explaining when and how the drawing was given. Instead of clearing things up, it just messes with Claude's head even more. And just when Claude thinks it can't get any worse, Felix shows him a portrait of him and Athanasia together. Reality officially starts cracking. Claude takes one look at the portrait and immediately rejects it. There's no way he'd ever make that soft, caring expression. In his mind, this has witchcraft written all over it. In fact, he even starts wondering if it would be easier to just execute Athanasia and be done with all this confusion. Seeing where this is heading, Felix wisely decides, yeah, I'm out, and leaves Claude alone with his spiraling thoughts. But the silence doesn't help. Suddenly, a vivid memory hits Claude Athanasia, asking him to grant her a wish that only he could fulfill. Ever since that moment, he hasn't been able to sleep properly. His mind drifts to Diana, the one person he never wanted to remember because losing her broke him completely. In these haunting visions, she keeps asking him to take care of her child. Claude can't accept that. How is he supposed to love someone who survived, when the person he loved most didn't? Frustrated, he bitterly tells Diana to come back as a ghost and take care of Athanasia herself if she's so worried. But just as he reaches out to her, she fades away again. That moment says everything. This is why Claude acts so cold. He's already lost too much, and he refuses to go through that pain again. Feeling nothing is safer than risking everything. Morning comes, and Claude wakes up to loud celebrations. Turns out, it's his birthday. Before he can even process anything, he's already sitting on his throne, being greeted and praised like the emperor he is. Felix, however, can't help but notice the obvious. Claude looks like he hasn't slept in days. Then Lord Padma steps in, casually asking why Athanasia isn't present, since he assumed she'd attend like she did at her debut. Claude just stares at him, completely unamused, like, wrong question, wrong time. Meanwhile, back at the Emerald Palace, Athanasia is just passing time with Birdie when she notices how unusually quiet everything is. Hannah explains that everyone's busy preparing for the banquet tonight. That's when it clicks, it's her father's birthday. She was planning to go, but never received an invitation. That realization stings a little. Seeing her mood drop, Hannah tries to cheer her up by promising a special dinner, which Athanasia appreciates, even if it doesn't fully fix things. Then, out of nowhere, royal knights arrive with a message. Claude is summoning Athanasia to the banquet immediately. She arrives, unsure of what to do, but things go downhill fast. A knight orders her to kneel before Claude, and the entire room starts buzzing. Then Claude, in peak cold emperor mode, declares that her mere presence is disturbing him even on his birthday. Felix tries to step in and calm things down, but Claude shuts him up instantly with a threat. And then comes the real blow. In front of everyone, Claude announces that Athanasia is not his daughter, not even a princess. According to him, she's a criminal one who should be executed the next time he sees her. He just isn't in the mood to do it today. With that chilling statement, Emperor Claude casually ends the banquet, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and one girl completely shattered. Right now, Claude is basically an ice statue with a crown, completely emotionless and acting exactly like the ruthless emperor from the novel. Without a second thought, he orders the guards to drag Athanasia away. But the moment they grab her, she pushes them back using magic, instantly shocking everyone in the room. Athanasia, done playing the weak role, straightens up and says she'll leave on her own. Matching Claude's cold energy, she calmly wishes him a happy birthday, like it means absolutely nothing, then walks out with a blank, distant look. But the second she's out of sight, that strong front cracks, she runs, stumbles, and starts trembling in fear. Not far behind her is Ezekiel, who followed her out. He finds her collapsed, gently puts her fallen sandals back on her feet, and asks if she's okay. Honestly, terrible question. Of course she's not okay. She hasn't been okay ever since Claude lost his memories of her. Athanasia quickly turns her face away, insisting she's not crying, but the tears say otherwise. Deep down, she knows she's not completely innocent either. She did lie to Claude at first just to survive. But somewhere along the way, things changed. She got attached. And now it hurts. In her past life, she was lonely and struggling. And now, different world, same loneliness. The happiness she keeps reaching for still feels out of reach. Ezekiel quietly comforts her, saying he didn't see anything, giving her the space to finally break down completely. Meanwhile, Claude retreats to his chambers, but peace doesn't follow him. Athanasia's cold stare keeps replaying in his head, giving him a pounding headache and a strange feeling like something important is missing. Later, when Ezekiel returns home, his father is furious that he went after Athanasia, especially after she was publicly humiliated. But for once, Ezekiel pushes back. He says he was always taught to be rational, but today, he learned that being rational isn't enough if it means ignoring someone's pain. He admits he doesn't have the heart to watch Athanasia cry or forgive the people who caused it. That's the moment his father realizes kids don't always follow their parents' rules. A few days pass, and suddenly Jeanette stops sending letters. Athanasia can't help but think Roger might be behind it. Meanwhile, Siaz suggests something wild, maybe hitting Claude on the head will bring his memories back. Hannah immediately shuts that down because, well, that's a one-way ticket to execution. Trying to lift Athanasia's mood, Lily takes her outside for some fresh air. As Athanasia steps out, the brightness almost surprises her. It's been a while since she's been out in the open like this, not since that painful night after the banquet. At the same time, Claude, despite running on zero sleep, feels strangely clear-headed. To him, this might be the perfect moment to finally get rid of the source of his constant headaches, Athanasia. As Athanasia walks through the royal garden, absent-mindedly picking roses, she suddenly runs into Claude. And just like before, his expression is ice-cold. He casually says he should have gotten rid of her earlier, and then attacks her with magic. But something unexpected happens. His magic doesn't hit her. A protective barrier blocks it. Even Claude recognizes it. It's his own magic. Still, he keeps attacking, over and over, but every strike gets stopped. Frustrated, he declares that he hates everything about her and wants to erase it completely. Athanasia, standing there, starts to question everything. Is this her punishment? Back during the Mana outbreak, Claude sacrificed himself to save her, and now he's trying to kill her. After this, how is she supposed to call him father? Realizing she can't change him right now, she makes a painful decision. The only thing she can do is disappear before things get worse. Gathering her strength, she uses her own power, and in a quiet, heartbreaking moment, she vanishes right in front of him. Her last words? A simple goodbye. Soon after, Felix and Lily show up, completely out of the loop, asking what just happened. Claude, clearly not in the mood for explanations, snaps that Athanasia has vanished and orders them to find her immediately. No excuses, no delays. Meanwhile, Lucas finally reaches the sacred world tree, only to find it completely fruitless. Out of options and patience, he does the worst possible thing: he attacks it with a fireball. Naturally, that doesn't go well. His reckless move starts triggering disasters all across the continent, because apparently, setting a magical world tree on fire has consequences. Elsewhere, Athanasia is digging through Jeanette's room, looking for anything related to memories. At the same time, she and Jeanette are casually having tea, well, casually for Jeanette, who's cheerful as ever. Athanasia, on the other hand, is sitting there wondering how her life turned into this confusing mess. Looking back, Athanasia remembers how things used to be. In the Olean Empire, all magicians are supposed to register themselves, no matter who they work for. But Lily convinced her to hide her powers, possibly to keep her under control, especially since those powers appeared suddenly and Athanasia still can't manage them properly. This leads her to wonder if she really absorbed Raven, and whether that's why Lucas warned her so strongly about getting attached. Since escaping Claude, Athanasia has been living on the run alone, anxious, and constantly on edge, even though she's been through something like this before in her past life. To make things worse, she hears that the Emperor is still actively searching for her using image stones. It makes her question if Claude truly hates her enough to want her dead that badly. As if that wasn't enough, she recalls a merchant once telling her she was cursed. That thought lingers, and she starts suspecting Jeanette after all. Jeanette is the only one close to her who has ties to dark magic. Around this time, Athanasia witnesses something unusual, Jeanette crying. She desperately wants to attend her aunt Countess Rosaria's funeral, but Raja refuses to let her go. In the original story, Rosaria was actually the one plotting against Athanasia to secure Jeanette's place as heir. Later, Jeanette finds a letter from Athanasia, suggesting they meet in 3 days. Athanasia herself isn't even sure if sending it was a good idea or just an impulsive decision driven by their brief time as pen pals. Feeling conflicted, Athanasia thinks about how unfair it is that Jeanette can't even see her only family member. This leads her to consider something risky visiting Claude. She figures she can always run away if things go wrong. But before she can even fully commit to the idea, she suddenly teleports straight into his room. There, she finds Claude asleep, surrounded by scattered papers. To her surprise, they're all her drawings, even the ones she never gave him. She also notices he looks thinner, which bothers her. Somehow, despite everything she's been through, she seems to be doing better than him. Claude wakes up, but instead of reacting with shock or anger, he's strangely calm. It turns out he thinks he's dreaming because he's been dreaming about her every day since she disappeared. Taking advantage of the moment, Athanasia asks him directly if he still wants to kill her. Without hesitation, he says yes, going as far as saying he'd tear her apart. That answer hits hard. Upset, Athanasia declares she'll never die by his hands and disappears again, leaving Claude stunned as he realizes it wasn't a dream after all. 3 days later, Athanasia keeps her promise and visits Jeanette. The moment she appears at the window, Jeanette rushes to hug her, overwhelmed with relief and emotion. She admits she was terrified she'd never see her again. This time, Athanasia doesn't pull away, they both hold onto the moment. After that, Athanasia starts visiting Jeanette regularly. They spend quiet afternoons together, enjoying tea like everything is normal. But Athanasia can't fully relax. Her mind drifts back to Countess Rosaria's death, which was supposedly caused by a landslide, something that shouldn't have happened if events were still following the original story. Feeling uneasy, Athanasia suggests they go outside for a change. Both of them have spent their lives trapped, Jeanette in the Duke's estate and Athanasia in the Imperial Palace. For once, they just want to step outside and experience something different. After putting on a disguise, Athanasia takes Jeanette out of the estate using teleportation, and the two casually wander through the market like it's the most normal thing in the world. Athanasia soon notices that Jeanette has gone unusually quiet. Then it hits her maybe Jeanette is already used to this kind of magic by now. Trying to lighten the mood, Athanasia suggests they drop the formalities and act more casually since they're friends now. Just as things start to feel relaxed, a disguised Anastasius suddenly appears and approaches them, recognizing Jeanette. Athanasia is caught off guard, thinking he looks strangely similar to her father. Meanwhile, Anastasius looks at Athanasia and casually wonders if she's the sister Jeanette mentioned when buying a ribbon. That comment instantly puts Jeanette into panic mode. Before the awkwardness can fully settle, a group of kids runs past them. Anastasius casually mentions that the children are heading to a craft shop and offers to guide them there. Athanasia is clearly suspicious, but Jeanette, being far too trusting, follows him without hesitation, leaving Athanasia with no choice but to tag along. Inside the craft shop, Athanasia is immediately distracted by all the interesting items on display. At the same time, Jeanette quietly pulls Anastasius aside and asks him to keep the whole sister situation a secret. As they talk, Jeanette once again notices how much he resembles her father. But when he starts asking more questions, she quickly backtracks, clearly uncomfortable, and changes her tone. Sensing something is off, Athanasia steps in and pulls Jeanette away, deciding that Anastasius is way too suspicious to trust. Later on, trying to lift the mood, Athanasia gives Jeanette a bracelet as a gift, though she worries it might not suit her. That concern disappears instantly when she sees Jeanette's face light up with pure joy as she hugs the bracelet tightly to her chest. As the day winds down, they say goodbye to Anastasius. Athanasia takes one last look at him, and this time, he reminds her of Lucas. Maybe it's the hair. The two girls head back before dinner, already making plans to sneak out again and watch fireworks together next time. Jeanette can't stop expressing how happy she is. She admits that the past few days without Athanasia felt unbearable, and spending time together again means everything to her. Hearing that, Athanasia feels satisfied, wrapping up their secret outing on a warm note. Elsewhere, Lucas manages to grab a branch from the Sacred World tree. Feeling accomplished, he finally leaves, eager to return home, probably imagining Athanasia waiting for him. That night, heavy rain pours down as Ezekiel stops by Jeanette's room to check on her. She gently tells him to rest, knowing he's been exhausting himself searching for Athanasia. Even though she had just spent time with Athanasia earlier, she keeps it a secret, feeling torn but determined to protect her, especially since Athanasia has brought so much happiness into her life. Not long after, Jeanette hears voices arguing somewhere in the manor. Curious, she sneaks out to investigate, and to her surprise, she spots Anastasius again. Roger introduces him as an acquaintance who will be staying at the estate for a while. Caught off guard, Jeanette quickly apologizes for interrupting, saying she was only worried about the noise. Following Roger's orders, she leaves, but not before stealing a nervous glance at Anastasius, clearly worried he might reveal something she'd rather keep hidden. Meanwhile, Roger is not thrilled about how things just went down. Still, Anastasius calmly assures him that he won't reveal his true identity. Roger, however, isn't convinced. He points out that Jeanette is sharp. There's no way she won't notice how much Anastasius resembles Claude. That comment wipes the smile right off Anastasius's face, and he quickly tells Roger to watch what he says. It turns out Roger has been carefully plotting his way into high society, using Jeanette as his stepping stone. But then Anastasius suddenly appeared out of nowhere and casually dropped the bomb that he's Jeanette's father. That alone is bad enough, but the fact that he's alive, even worse. If people find out the truth, everything Roger has worked for could crumble instantly. Naturally, this makes Anastasius less of a guest and more of a problem Roger would very much like to remove. A few days later, Jeanette is quietly sneaking around, clearly hoping to run into Anastasius. He notices her almost immediately and asks what she's doing. Thinking quickly, she says she just wants to take a walk in the garden. Conveniently, he says he was heading there too. As they stroll together, Jeanette asks him to keep their meeting at the festival a secret. He reassures her with a knowing smile that he remembers their little secret. Their moment is cut short when a maid arrives to summon Jeanette. Later, Roger tells her that he wants her to accompany him to the Imperial Palace. Sensing her concern about Claude, he adds that she'll at least be able to see him from a distance, which softens the news a bit. Afterward, Jeanette shares this update with Athanasia, which immediately gets her thinking. Maybe she should follow them too after all. She does miss everyone at the palace, even if things are complicated. At the Imperial Palace, Jeanette decides to take a peaceful walk through the Emerald Palace garden. But her calm stroll takes a sharp turn when she suddenly finds the Emperor lying on the ground. Panicking, she rushes to check on him, and to her surprise, Athanasia appears as well. The moment Claude starts to wake up, Athanasia quickly hides, leaving Jeanette alone to deal with a very disoriented emperor. Not long after, Lucas arrives and thanks Jeanette for helping. As Claude is carried away by his knights, he glances at Jeanette, clearly puzzled by her presence. Later on, Roger is absolutely delighted. He announces that they've been granted an audience with Claude. In his mind, this is the perfect chance to push his plan forward, especially now that Athanasia is supposedly out of the picture. He then sends Jeanette back to her room, likely already scheming his next move. On her way back, Jeanette runs into Athanasia, who has been waiting for her. Athanasia is a bit embarrassed at being seen earlier, but she admits she couldn't help it. She was worried about her father. She immediately asks if he's okay. Jeanette explains that he was taken away by his knights, so she's not entirely sure about his condition. Jeanette then mentions their upcoming audience with Claude, which makes Athanasia uneasy. If things follow the original story, this could mean she'll end up completely alone. To make matters worse, Claude still hasn't regained his memories, so if he sees Jeanette, he might recognize her as a princess, and that could change everything. The next day, things get even more awkward. Anastasius approaches Jeanette and immediately notices something different. Her blue jeweled eyes are gone. She had taken them off because they were uncomfortable, but now she can't help thinking she's made a huge mistake. Panic kicks in, and instead of explaining anything, she does the only thing her brain can manage at that moment. She runs. Covering her eyes like that might somehow fix everything. She rushes off, leaving Anastasius even more suspicious. Not long after, Athanasia shows up, clearly concerned, and checks on Jeanette. One look is enough to tell something's wrong. Jeanette tries to hold it together, but it's obvious she's shaken. The next day, Jeanette once again tries to find a chance to talk to Anastasius. She wants to ask him again to keep what he saw a secret. But before she can even say a word, Anastasius approaches her first. Not only that, he suddenly kneels and bluntly asks if she's of royal blood. Jeanette doesn't answer, but her shocked expression says everything. Realizing this, he calmly reassures her that her secret is safe with him too. Unfortunately, they're not alone. Athanasia has been secretly watching the whole scene, and she's far from convinced. To her, someone like Anastasius is way too suspicious to be trusted so easily. Later, she casually brings him up and asks Jeanette about him, but Jeanette admits she barely knows anything, just a few encounters and shared secrets. That only makes Athanasia more uneasy. Since Jeanette seems a bit too innocent for her own good, Athanasia decides to investigate Anastasius herself. However, no matter how hard she tries, she finds absolutely nothing about him. At the same time, she's also stuck trying to figure out how to restore her father's lost memories. That night, Roger confronts Anastasius and warns him to stay away from Jeanette. Anastasius, however, turns the tables and points out that Roger should have managed Jeanette better in the first place. Before leaving, he gives one last piece of advice. Keep Jeanette focused on Claude so she won't dig into Anastasius's true identity. Soon after, Jeanette finally gets her long-awaited audience with Claude. Sadly, it's painfully awkward. Just as she gathers the courage to speak, Claude falls asleep mid-meeting. Disappointed and unable to say anything, she quietly leaves. Moments later, Claude wakes up, clutching his head as another wave of intense headaches hits him. Later that day, Roger tells Jeanette that Claude has asked to see her again, which leaves her confused. Roger, on the other hand, is secretly thrilled. He's hoping Claude will grow fond of Jeanette, so he can eventually use him to get rid of Anastasius. Back in her room, Jeanette runs into Anastasius again. She happily shares that she'll be meeting the Emperor once more. He encourages her, but can't help staring at her a little too much. When she asks why, he simply says he's glad to see her happy. Jeanette smiles and says she truly is happy after all. They're her family. As Anastasius goes about his day, he starts wondering who Jeanette resembles. Not long after, he crosses paths with Ezekiel, who, like Athanasia, finds Anastasius suspicious. With his father acting strangely after meeting him and other odd events piling up, Ezekiel begins to wonder if all of this is really just coincidence. Meanwhile, at the Emerald Palace, Lily is quietly sewing when Athanasia suddenly appears. Lily immediately hugs her, relieved to see her safe after disappearing for so long. Athanasia says she won't stay long, she just came to check on her. Still, she's worried that Claude might kill her. Lily reassures her, explaining that the Emperor has actually been anxious about her and even ordered everyone to welcome her warmly if she returns. When Athanasia asks if Claude has regained his memories, Lily says no, leaving her uncertain about whether she should meet him. At the same time, Claude and Jeanette have another meeting. Once again, Claude barely responds to her. The only thing on his mind is that his headaches disappear whenever Jeanette is near. He isn't even listening to what she says. Watching this, Athanasia can't help but think that, in another story, Claude and Jeanette might have lived happily together without her in the way. Feeling disheartened, she decides to leave. She teleports back to Jeanette's room, only to find Ezekiel already there. He questions where she's been and admits he's been worried sick looking for her. Athanasia explains she's been on the run, which only makes him more concerned. He offers her a place to stay at the estate and promises to keep her safe. Though she hesitates, not wanting to cause trouble for Jeanette, she eventually agrees. Not long after, Jeanette returns to her room only to walk in and find Athanasia and Ezekiel together, which is definitely not what she expected. Athanasia quickly switches gears and pretends it's her first time meeting Jeanette, but Jeanette isn't fooled for a second. Ezekiel casually explains that Athanasia will be staying at the estate for a while. For some reason, that news makes Jeanette feel a little sad. She quietly realizes that their special little secret is no longer just between the two of them. Athanasia, on the other hand, is genuinely grateful for the room Ezekiel arranged. At last, she doesn't have to keep jumping from one inn to another. Meanwhile, Jeanette feels a bit useless, wishing she could have done something like that for her. To make matters worse, it all seems so easy for Ezekiel. Later, Ezekiel chats with Jeanette about her meeting with the Emperor, but he quickly notices her sulky mood. He wonders if she's unhappy that they found Athanasia. In truth, that's not it at all. Jeanette is just upset because Ezekiel assumes Athanasia came to see him, when really, she came looking for Jeanette. At the same time, Athanasia reflects on how Jeanette and Claude seem to be getting closer. She tells herself that even if she's forgotten, at least she's safer now, no one plotting against her, and she has powers to protect herself. After all, her original goal was simple, just survive. And yet, despite everything, she still feels lonely. Since settling into the Althea estate, Ezekiel visits her often to keep her company. Curious and concerned, he asks how she managed while on the run. Realizing how hard it must have been, he invites her to the garden, the exact place where they first met. Athanasia can't help but wonder why he would pick a place full of her most embarrassing memories. Still, she starts picking flowers and smelling them, trying to relax. Ezekiel watches her quietly, completely mesmerized. Without thinking, he reaches out to fix her hair, but the moment she notices, he panics and pulls his hand back, embarrassed. Meanwhile, Claude once again falls asleep during another meeting with Jeanette. Surprisingly, she leaves feeling a tiny bit hopeful. When she tells Roger about it, he's convinced things are progressing nicely. What he doesn't realize is that Claude only participates by taking a nap. Deep down, Jeanette starts to suspect that the Emperor doesn't really care about her at all. Later, Jeanette visits Athanasia, who happily chats about the books Ezekiel lent her. But even after talking for hours, Athanasia never once asks about Jeanette. That small detail leaves Jeanette feeling like something is missing. Feeling uneasy, Jeanette opens up to Anastasius, who has already noticed her mood. She admits she thought she'd be happy spending time with the Emperor and the Princess, but now there feels like a distance between them. Anastasius bluntly points out the obvious: they don't even know she's part of their family. Still, Jeanette insists that they are her family. As she keeps talking about her idea of family, Anastasius grows more and more irritated. He warns her that even if she reveals the truth, the Emperor and the Princess might not welcome her. Royal life is complicated, after all. He even suggests that the only reason the Emperor is seeing her is because the Princess ran away, and once she returns, Jeanette might be forgotten. His words hit hard. When Jeanette asks how he can speak so confidently, he simply gives her a cold, unreadable look. Soon after, Roger calls Anastasius away for a private talk. Left alone, Jeanette goes straight to Athanasia and nervously asks what she thinks about the idea of them being sisters. The question completely catches Athanasia off guard, leaving her speechless. That silence says everything. Heartbroken, Jeanette quietly leaves. Athanasia feels guilty for not giving her the answer she wanted. Meanwhile, Jeanette, despite being hurt, still believes Athanasia cares about her. The next day, Anastasius shows up with a snow globe as an apology, admitting he crossed a line. Jeanette accepts it kindly and even apologizes back, believing his actions came from concern for her. What she doesn't know is that the snow globe is enchanted with a spell. For the first time, Jeanette feels like someone truly cares about her feelings. In reality, Anastasius has his own hidden agenda. He originally planned to manipulate her directly, but since that proved difficult, he decided to take a more magical shortcut. He even made getting the gift a bit challenging, partly because he's still annoyed with her. After giving her the snow globe, he leaves only to run into Athanasia. The moment they touch, a sharp static shock passes between them, immediately raising Athanasia's suspicions. Anastasius winces, annoyed, realizing that Claude's protective magic around Athanasia is still causing problems for him. Later, Athanasia also apologizes to Jeanette. Seeing this, Jeanette realizes that Athanasia feels bad too, and starts blaming herself for asking such an awkward question. Determined to fix things, Jeanette decides she'll make things right between them. And as for Claude, in his next meeting, he once again zones out this time, thinking about Athanasia instead. Clearly, his attention is somewhere else entirely. Jeanette finally gathers the courage to ask the question that's clearly been hanging in the air: does he miss Athanasia? The question snaps Claude out of his thoughts like a loud knock on the door. He admits, yes, that's exactly who he was thinking about. He opens up about how he's still searching for her and assures both Jeanette and Felix that he has no intention of hurting her anymore. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Jeanette rushes to Athanasia with the latest update, practically pushing her to go meet Claude. Athanasia isn't so easily convinced. She hesitates, unsure if this is a good idea. She even insists she won't meet him again, but clearly, her feet didn't get that memo. Despite Athanasia swearing she'd never see Claude again, she immediately starts sneaking around the palace like a tiny magical ninja, completely breaking the promise she made to Jeanette. At this point, even she's wondering why Claude has knights and magicians searching every corner of the empire just to find her. Isn't this a little excessive? While wandering through the palace, she spots Felix and decides to quietly follow him using her invisibility magic since he normally can't sense mana. But before she can even react, Felix suddenly spins around and points his sword right at her throat. The man goes from loyal bodyguard to full action hero in half a second. The moment he realizes it's Athanasia, though, he instantly panics and starts apologizing like his soul just left his body. Athanasia is honestly stunned seeing this intense side of him. She explains she only came to check on everyone for a little while, but Felix quickly reveals that Claude has been desperately searching for her this entire time because he misses her. Hearing that softens her heart enough to finally meet Claude again. When Athanasia enters the room, Claude greets her with the same cold stare he always has equipped like it's part of his royal uniform. Trying to break the awkward silence, she casually asks how he's been, but Claude ignores the small talk and orders Felix to leave them alone. Felix looks worried, but Athanasia reassures him before sitting at the familiar table she hasn't seen in forever. Claude immediately starts questioning her about where she's been and what she's been doing since leaving. Athanasia answers that she's just been wandering around and surviving somehow. But while talking, she notices Claude looks much thinner and more exhausted than before. It completely confuses her because he's acting like a worried father after spending so long denying he was one. Finally gathering enough courage, she asks why he suddenly cares so much. Claude quietly admits he doesn't really understand it himself. He just knows that seeing her sad bothers him more than it should. But before the emotional moment can fully settle in, Claude suddenly gets hit with another painful headache. He quickly dismisses Athanasia and insists she stay at the Emerald Palace. Concerned, she rushes to get Felix. But before Felix enters the room, Claude orders him to summon Jeanette. Hearing that instantly crushes Athanasia's mood. Later, Athanasia runs into Jeanette after one of her visits with Claude, and things become even more confusing. Athanasia recently learned that Claude can apparently only sleep peacefully when Jeanette is nearby. Now she has no idea what to think anymore. Claude wants her to stay close despite losing his memories, yet he constantly calls for Jeanette too. Her emotions are becoming one giant tangled mess. Still, the thought that sticks with her most is the possibility that Claude genuinely worries about her. Before she can think any further, Lucas suddenly appears right in front of her face out of nowhere, nearly scaring both girls to death. Athanasia immediately drags him into a private room and absolutely unloads on him. Furious and emotional, she demands to know where he's been all this time. Tears start pouring out as she tells him everything at lightning speed. Her mana explosion, Claude almost killing her, escaping the palace, and living with Jeanette. Ironically, Lucas ends up even angrier than she is. The moment he hears what Claude did, he starts radiating pure murderous energy toward the Emperor. Athanasia literally has to smack him to calm him down before he starts a war. After piecing together the story, Lucas becomes confused because he already did everything possible to stop Athanasia's powers from becoming unstable. But when she begs the greatest archmage alive to help her father, Lucas finally examines Claude while he sleeps. What he discovers shocks both of them. Claude isn't just suffering from memory loss. He's dying. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Jeanette happily tells Anastasius that the Emperor can finally sleep whenever she's nearby. To her, it sounds like good news because Claude is finally resting peacefully. But Anastasius's suspicious little smile makes it painfully obvious he knows much more than he's letting on. Athanasia struggles to understand Lucas's explanation at first, but he eventually reveals the truth. Claude's condition isn't an illness at all. It's a curse caused by dark magic. Lucas temporarily eases Claude's pain with a spell, and for one brief moment, Claude's face finally relaxes, only for the effect to shatter almost instantly. Even Lucas can't fully cure him. He explains that Claude's memory loss, violent headaches, sudden aggression toward Athanasia, and even his dependence on Jeanette are all connected to the dark magic. Jeanette's mana acts like a stabilizer that temporarily calms the curse. Back in Athanasia's room, she desperately asks why Claude ever used dark magic in the first place. Lucas tells her to think carefully, and suddenly her mana explosion incident starts making sense. That accident had thrown Lucas back in time to when Claude was still consumed by dark magic. According to Lucas, Athanasia's strange mana composition triggered the entire event. Then he casually drops another shocking statement: she's experienced something like this before. That completely stuns her. Now that Lucas has regained his own mana, he can clearly see Athanasia's magical aura, and instead of being worried, the man looks weirdly fascinated by it, like he just discovered a new science project. Lucas explains that the dark magic inside Claude was once interrupted before it could fully consume him. He noticed it long ago but simply ignored it because, in classic Lucas fashion, it wasn't his problem. Unfortunately, now that the curse has returned, destroying it outright would kill Claude instantly. That realization completely breaks Athanasia, and she starts crying again. Lucas, meanwhile, gets strangely irritated by how devastated she is. Part of him thinks that if Claude is going to die anyway, maybe it would be easier to let him go instead of dragging out everyone's suffering. But watching Athanasia cry keeps bothering him more than he wants to admit. He remembers something his old teacher once told him. One day, he would understand the pain of losing someone important. Lucas never understood those words when his own master died, and honestly, he never wanted to. But now, seeing Athanasia suffer this much over Claude, he starts wondering if this is what his teacher meant all along. Finally, Lucas tells her the truth as honestly as he can. Even though Claude gets painful headaches around her, the fact that he still wants her close proves he genuinely cares about her. Sadly, the dark magic is slowly killing him anyway. Athanasia then remembers the dream she once saw of the original story where Claude happily lived alongside Jeanette. Back then, it looked like a perfect fairy tale ending. Now she realizes that beautiful ending may have always led straight to Claude's death. Sensing how miserable Athanasia feels, Lucas decides to lighten the mood the only way he knows how, by dramatically complaining about how overworked he is right after returning from his journey. Athanasia jokingly asks if he wants a kiss as payment for all his suffering. Unfortunately for her, Lucas takes that statement completely seriously. Without hesitation, he points to his cheek and waits expectantly like a man collecting taxes. Athanasia is absolutely stunned that he's not joking. Sadly for them, Lily accidentally witnesses the entire thing. She immediately backs away in total disbelief, probably questioning reality itself. Later, when Felix checks the room and only finds Athanasia alone, Lily starts wondering if she hallucinated the whole scene. Over the next few mornings, Athanasia continues visiting Claude every day. Thanks to Lucas helping stabilize his condition, Claude finally starts sleeping a little better and slowly regains some strength, even if his memories are still gone. It's only temporary relief, but at least it's something. One day, a maid brings in a cake. Since Claude famously hates sweet things, Athanasia assumes it must be for her. Sure enough, Felix reveals he ordered it, while Claude stares at the dessert like it personally offended him. Not wanting to eat alone, Athanasia instead drinks some tea, and the taste instantly floods her with warm memories. She smiles so softly that even Claude and Felix get completely captivated for a moment. The sight reminds Claude of Diana offering him tea long ago, and for a second, he almost looks peaceful. Then the headache hits again. Already irritated, Claude notices Athanasia happily stuffing cake into her mouth right after acting all emotional a minute ago. The contrast is so ridiculous that she impulsively shoves a piece of cake directly into his mouth like old times. Claude immediately decides he has suffered enough for one day and kicks both Athanasia and Felix out of the room without hesitation. Meanwhile, over at the Alpheus estate, Anastasius, Roger, and Jeanette discuss her visits to the palace. Jeanette casually mentions Athanasia looking tired and Lucas suddenly returning. The moment she says Lucas helped improve Claude's condition, Anastasius's mood instantly darkens. Once Jeanette leaves, the conversation becomes much more serious. Anastasius complains that he lost his chance to make a move while Athanasia was staying at the estate, which completely shocks Roger because apparently nobody told him assassination plans were on the schedule. Roger nervously points out that Athanasia has powerful magic anyway, so stopping her wouldn't have been easy. What really worries Anastasius, though, is Lucas. Not only has the strongest magician returned from the World Tree expedition, but he might also cure Claude's memory loss entirely. Ironically, the memory loss wasn't even part of Anastasius's original plan. Elsewhere, Lucas returns to his tower only to find someone has completely ransacked the place. As he investigates, Claude suddenly recalls an old childhood memory. Young Claude is searching for his older brother Anastasius before class starts, only to find him standing there blankly staring upward like he's hearing voices from another dimension. When Claude grabs his hand, Anastasius quietly says he feels like someone is calling him, almost as if their mother's anger is reaching out to him. The disturbing memory suddenly snaps present-day Claude back to reality, leaving him stressed and distracted while people keep asking if he and Athanasia have made up yet. Back at the tower, Lucas realizes the intruder didn't really learn anything new from searching the place. He briefly considers hunting down whoever trespassed, but then remembers Athanasia and decides protecting her matters more right now. So instead, he starts investigating the palace more carefully. Meanwhile, Athanasia briefly considers the highly scientific strategy of smacking Claude in the head to restore his memories. She immediately abandons the idea after remembering his automatic defense magic would probably vaporize her first. Soon after, Jeanette arrives, creating yet another painfully awkward group interaction. Only Athanasia seems to notice the weird tension filling the room. Jeanette brings homemade sweets and offers them to Claude. To Athanasia's horror, Claude calmly accepts them without complaint, despite acting like her cake was poison earlier. When he casually eats the sweets without reacting to the sugar at all, Athanasia becomes internally offended. This man is absolutely playing favorites. Felix tries to explain that Claude naturally acts more polite around Jeanette because she's technically a guest from House Alpheus. Around Athanasia, though, he feels comfortable enough to openly show irritation and emotion. Felix gently reassures her that even without his memories, Claude's behavior proves things are slowly improving. Realizing she's been sulking the entire time, Athanasia gets embarrassed, apologizes, and thanks Felix sincerely for comforting her. A few days later, Ezekiel requests a meeting with Athanasia. She suddenly realizes she vanished without ever contacting him afterward, which honestly makes her feel pretty guilty. Ignoring the maid's panic over her refusal to dress properly, she goes out to meet him anyway. The two quickly fall into an easy conversation. Athanasia thanks him for always supporting her, while Ezekiel admits he's simply relieved she's safe. Only now does she truly notice how much he's matured. Not only has he become ridiculously handsome, but he's also unbelievably kind and thoughtful. Ezekiel gently says he worries about her, especially with Claude's memory loss weighing heavily on her shoulders. Athanasia internally realizes this man is dangerously perfect. No wonder Jeanette likes him so much. But when she brings up Jeanette, Ezekiel calmly clarifies that he sees Jeanette more like a sister. That answer instantly makes things awkward. Trying to recover, Athanasia praises how kind he is to everyone, only for Ezekiel to bluntly admit he's not actually kind to everyone at all. That honest answer leaves Athanasia spiraling because now she's no longer sure whether his feelings for her ever disappeared in the first place. Thankfully, before the conversation can become even more dangerous, Lucas suddenly appears out of nowhere like a professional relationship destroyer. Ezekiel offers to escort Athanasia, but Lucas immediately shuts the idea down with the energy of a jealous cat guarding its territory. To make things worse, Lucas intentionally leans extremely close to Athanasia right in front of Ezekiel, clearly trying to provoke him. Athanasia becomes increasingly uncomfortable while the two men silently battle each other with eye contact alone. Refusing to lose, Ezekiel calmly takes Athanasia's hand and kisses it gracefully before thanking her for the audience. He and Lucas exchange one final death glare before Ezekiel finally leaves. Later, Athanasia braids Lucas's hair to calm herself down after surviving that entire disaster of a conversation. As she works, she starts overthinking everything again. In the original story, Ezekiel was supposed to end up with Jeanette, so why do his feelings toward her still seem so strong? The more she thinks about it, the more she starts doubting whether she even remembered the original novel correctly at all. Maybe her existence has already changed the story far more than she realized. Suddenly, Lucas grabs her arm and asks what she was just thinking about. Unknown to Athanasia, Lucas had witnessed something terrifying. Her mana had surged violently again. For once, Lucas looks genuinely serious as he tells her never to give up, especially when it comes to saving her father. No matter what happens, he promises they'll find an answer together. Meanwhile, Athanasia is completely confused by Lucas's sudden serious speech. To brush it off, she casually admits that she was actually thinking about Ezekiel. Big mistake. The moment she says his name, Lucas immediately looks offended and starts questioning her taste in men. Apparently, he assumes she likes the calm and pretentious gentleman type. Athanasia quickly denies it, but she still defends Ezekiel by calling him polite, kind, and well-mannered, which is basically the exact opposite of Lucas. Naturally, Lucas takes emotional damage from this. With a smug grin, he suddenly grabs her hand and kisses it dramatically before asking if this is what she considers gentlemanly behavior. Athanasia instantly turns bright red and, in full panic mode, kicks him out of the room before her brain completely shuts down. Meanwhile, Jeanette happily treasures the peaceful moments she shared with Athanasia and Claude. In her mind, if things continue smoothly like this, maybe the three of them could become one happy family someday. Still, one thing continues bothering her. When is Roger finally going to reveal her true identity to the Emperor? Back at the palace, Athanasia finds herself suffering from a completely different problem: romantic confusion. In desperation, she asks Lily and Felix if they've ever had someone confess to them before. Lily nearly short-circuits from embarrassment, while Felix casually answers first. From the way he talks, Athanasia quickly realizes Felix is secretly pretty popular. Unfortunately for him, spending every waking second babysitting Claude leaves zero room for romance. When she turns to Lily, the maid shyly admits she receives invitations to parties all the time, but usually avoids them because dancing and social events just aren't her thing. Felix suddenly becomes very interested in this information. Apparently, people often ask whether Lily likes him, but he always viewed their relationship more as protective companionship. Still, he quietly admits he's relieved he never forced her to dance at parties since she clearly hates that kind of attention. Honestly, Athanasia can't even blame herself for being confused anymore. For most of her life, she was too busy trying not to die. Now that romance has suddenly entered the picture, her brain simply cannot process it. Even so, saving her father's memories remains her top priority. Later, Athanasia invites Claude to go boating on the lake, something they used to do often together. To her surprise, Claude actually agrees instead of responding with his usual cold silence and grumpy staring. Trying to avoid awkwardness, she asks if he wants Jeanette to join them too. Claude simply shrugs and says it's her decision. But the second Athanasia leaves, Claude immediately orders Felix to clear every dangerous lake monster from the area. Felix awkwardly reminds him they already did that days ago because Claude had previously ordered it himself. Claude secretly worries about Athanasia more than ever now. Before their lake trip, he even asks Felix whether the water is too deep and what would happen if Athanasia accidentally fell in. Felix is completely stunned by the concern, but realizing he's revealing too much, Claude immediately shuts the conversation down. The next day, Athanasia and Jeanette arrive to find a massive luxurious boat waiting for them. Athanasia is shocked because Claude used to prefer simple things before losing his memories. During the ride, Claude quietly watches the two girls peacefully, until Jeanette suddenly falls into the lake. Athanasia panics and screams for Claude to save her, but he reacts strangely slowly and even tells Athanasia to sit down because she's getting wet. Furious, she yells at him until he finally rescues Jeanette. Afterward, Jeanette thanks him sincerely, only for Claude to stay completely silent, earning him another scolding from Athanasia. Later, Lucas notices Athanasia has become much bolder around her father. She insists Claude is slowly getting better, but Lucas warns her not to get too hopeful because the curse is only temporarily stable. Still, he admits he's glad she stopped crying all the time. When Lucas asks whether family is really that important to her, Athanasia quickly changes the subject and begs him to teach her magic so she won't feel helpless again like during Jeanette's accident. Even though Lucas hates teaching people, he surprisingly agrees. Lucas briefly remembers rejecting a young royal candidate named Eternitas years ago because he thought the boy looked weak. Back in the present, he smugly tells Athanasia she should feel honored because not even the legendary emperor got lessons from him. Athanasia, meanwhile, becomes increasingly concerned about how ancient this man actually is. Training begins immediately. Lucas teaches her how to control her mana flow, though his explanations sound like complete nonsense. Somehow, they still work. Athanasia excitedly asks to learn levitation next, but Lucas warns it's difficult. She argues Claude makes it look easy, only for Lucas to point out that both she and Claude are ridiculously stubborn perfectionists. Then, purely to show off, Lucas casually levitates everything in the room, including Athanasia herself, while she panics midair. Meanwhile, at the Alpheus estate, Jeanette admits she misses Athanasia and asks Ezekiel if he feels the same. He quietly admits Athanasia means more to him than anyone else in the world before suddenly apologizing and leaving, clearly troubled. Anastasius secretly watches the entire exchange from afar. Back at the palace, Athanasia reflects on Lucas saying Claude struggled in the past. To her, Claude always seemed naturally perfect at everything. While she watches him work one day, Claude notices her staring and immediately starts helping her study without even being asked. Athanasia secretly loves the attention and even wonders if he feels guilty for how harshly he treated her before. When Claude questions why she studies such advanced material, Athanasia shamelessly admits she enjoys being praised for being smart. Later, trying to impress him with her magic progress, she attempts to levitate a book, only for it to explode open and slap Claude directly in the face. Surprisingly, Claude doesn't get angry. Instead, he calmly teaches her how to control the spell properly. When she finally succeeds, Claude actually smiles and praises her, shocking both Athanasia and himself. But the moment quickly falls apart. Confused by his own feelings, Claude suddenly lashes out and orders her to leave. That night, Claude lies awake thinking about Athanasia. Even without his memories, he can't stop thinking about her. He spent so long trying to push her away, yet she stubbornly stays by his side anyway. And more than anything, she reminds him of Diana. Later, Lucas went to Athanasia's room just to tell her that her father was asleep. Athanasia thanked him for checking on him, and then said goodnight because she needed rest. Lucas, however, held back something important. He couldn't bring himself to tell her that her father's condition was actually far worse than she thought. After he left, Athanasia lay in bed, quietly hoping things between her and her father might finally improve. She even felt a small spark of hope that he might start treating her like he used to. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore Lucas's warning in the back of her mind. She began questioning herself. Had she focused so much on surviving that she never truly understood her father's pain or why he kept her at a distance? Then her thoughts drifted to what she knew from the novel. She started wondering if her father kept Jeanette close because Jeanette helped ease the pain caused by the side effects of dark magic. And if that was true, it might also explain why, in the story, he ordered Athanasia's execution after Jeanette was poisoned because she destroyed the one thing that kept him stable. That realization hit her hard. In the original story, Athanasia never even learned the reason she was killed. Tears filled her eyes as she felt an unfamiliar pain in her chest, like she was personally living that tragic fate. She didn't even understand why she was crying so much. That night, sleep barely came to her. The next morning, she woke up exhausted and looked completely drained. Lily noticed immediately and asked what had happened. Athanasia brushed it off, saying she just had a nightmare and didn't sleep at all. Even during breakfast, her mind stayed stuck on it. She realized her dreams were never complete, but they always showed one thing clearly: Jeanette being beside her father when he collapsed. If her dreams were true, then his condition might be getting worse, possibly even life-threatening. But what bothered her most was the mysterious person in her dreams whose face she could never see. She felt like she had to uncover who it was and what connection they had to her father's curse. She also remembered meeting him 4 years ago, which made her wonder, could she have somehow affected the dark magic curse when she was younger? Later, she met Lucas again and told him everything about her dream. Lucas explained that such dreams might not just be imagination, they could be warnings or traces of magic. He also revealed something more disturbing. Her father wasn't only affected by dark magic, but had also used several spells that erased emotions and memories. It seemed like he had been trying to forget someone so important that he went to extreme lengths to erase the pain. Athanasia quickly put the pieces together. There was only one person who could have meant that much to him: her mother, Diana. He had loved her deeply, and everything pointed to the fact that these dreams might actually be fragments of his buried memories. The realization broke her. She felt guilty for not understanding her father's suffering sooner. Even in her dreams, she could feel her mother's sadness too, as if she also understood the pain left behind. Lucas, seeing her cry, tried to calm her down. He told her that her father wasn't going to die yet and that she shouldn't panic. But then Athanasia remembered something strange. Lucas once said that as long as she stayed by her father's side, he wouldn't die. That didn't sound like comfort anymore. Now suspicious, Athanasia looked at Lucas and asked him directly to tell her the truth. Whatever was really happening to her father, she wanted to know it all. Lucas didn't want to tell Athanasia the truth because he knew she would break down again. But eventually, he admitted it: her father still had a large amount of mana, and it was extremely unstable. The real problem was that no one knew how long his recovery would take. Athanasia realized something uncomfortable. She had been too hopeful lately. She had assumed her father was getting better, but in reality, he had been slowly getting worse without her even noticing. Worried, she asked Lucas if there was anything she could do to help. Lucas explained that her magic was similar to her father's. When it becomes overloaded, it doesn't just weaken, it explodes. That raised a bigger question for him. How did Athanasia's magic even go out of control in the first place if he had left her in perfect condition? He asked if anything strange had happened that day. Athanasia remembered seeing a strange static-like energy, but Lucas didn't think much of it. Still, seeing her upset, he told her to calm down and keep practicing her magic spells. Maybe, he said, that was the only way she might discover how to help her father. Athanasia agreed. She promised she would try her best to understand what went wrong with her magic and find a way to save him. Meanwhile, Jeanette was alone in her room, feeling emotionally exhausted. She had once dreamed of marrying Ezekiel and living a fairy tale life. When she found out she was a princess, she even started believing that dream could come true. But reality hit hard. Ezekiel liked the other princess, Athanasia. Slowly, Jeanette realized she was not part of any happy ending. She felt lonely, unwanted, and stuck in a story where she didn't belong. Unable to sleep, she went out for a walk. On the balcony, she unexpectedly met a mysterious man. He noticed her immediately and asked what she was doing outside so late. Jeanette explained that she couldn't sleep. She had already figured out that he was secretly staying there, but she chose not to tell her father. That meant she now had another secret to carry. The man invited her to sit beside him, and Jeanette felt strangely comfortable with him. He was kind, calm, and polite, but despite that, she still felt a deep loneliness inside her. The man noticed her sadness. Jeanette eventually opened up and said she always felt left out, especially when Roger and others were together. She felt like she was always on the outside looking in. The man replied that if she truly belonged to the royal family, she wouldn't feel that way. He suggested she should tell the truth to the emperor and especially to the princess, but Jeanette hesitated. She didn't want to be seen as selfish for wanting a family. At that moment, the man revealed a bit of his own past. He had a difficult childhood too ignored for not having magic and even labeled as an illegitimate child. When the Empress discovered this, she pushed him toward one goal: become the prince no matter what. That pressure shaped his entire life. Jeanette realized he wasn't just speaking casually, he was someone who had also been deeply hurt. He admitted that having a real family might have made him happy. Jeanette felt sympathy for him and told him she would listen whenever he needed to talk, just like he listened to her. As he left, he gently reached out toward her, and Jeanette briefly panicked, thinking he might hurt her. But nothing bad happened, and she slowly relaxed. The next morning, Athanasia, Jeanette, and the Emperor were enjoying tea together. The heat was intense, so Athanasia suggested moving the tea to a cooler place. As she walked, she suddenly noticed a teapot was about to fall on her. Before she could react, her father grabbed it just in time and saved her. Athanasia immediately panicked when she saw her father's hand burned by the hot tea. Without wasting a second, she rushed to him, checked his injury, and quickly demanded that a mage be called. Her worry wasn't just about the burn, she could feel something was seriously wrong with him again. Cloud, seeing the situation, suddenly told Jeanette to go back home. Jeanette was shocked by how abruptly she was dismissed, but she had no choice but to leave. Around the same time, Lucas arrived and, just by looking at Jeanette as she left, sensed something strange about her magical energy. Something about her didn't feel normal at all. Later, back at home, Jeanette sat alone feeling upset. Just when she thought she could finally rest, Anastasius appeared in front of her again. He noticed her mood and told her he was worried about the Emperor, who was already in poor health. He pushed Jeanette again to tell the truth about her identity, but Jeanette hesitated. She had already asked the princess about it before, and the princess had stayed silent. That only confused her more. Anastasius, however, misread the situation. He believed Jeanette and Athanasia were becoming friends, and that the princess was simply trying to stay kind so Jeanette wouldn't turn against her in the future. But in reality, Jeanette was still lost and uncertain. Then things took a darker turn. A voice in Anastasius's mind began whispering that the Emperor should be removed quickly. While he was still calmly talking about how good and noble the Emperor and Princess were, the voice kept pushing him in the opposite direction. It told Cloud didn't deserve the throne. His expression changed. His eyes shifted from calm blue to a deep, unsettling red. Suddenly, his thoughts turned cold and sharp. He began suggesting that Jeanette should be the one closer to the throne, and that she should act more gentle and charming so the people would love her. On the outside, he sounded helpful, but inside, something twisted was clearly growing. Meanwhile, from a distance, Ezekiel was watching their conversation. He already suspected that something dangerous was going on, and this only confirmed his doubts. The next day, Jeanette returned to the palace. Anastasius met her again and noticed the bracelet she was wearing. Jeanette explained that the princess had given it to her as a gift. Anastasius realized Jeanette still wasn't ready to reveal the truth, so he secretly altered the bracelet with dark magic. Now, no one would be able to detect the strange energy inside it. After finishing his spell, he left with a satisfied smile. It was clear he was finally getting closer to whatever revenge he was planning. Later, Jeanette met the Emperor and soon returned home in tears. She told Anastasius that His Majesty had suddenly become very ill, which shocked her completely. Inside the palace, Athanasia stays by her father's side as he lies unconscious. Lucas arrives and gently tells her to rest. She explains they were just drinking tea when the Emperor suddenly started bleeding out of nowhere, which clearly doesn't add up. Lucas suspects dark magic is involved, possibly the same force that attacked earlier. Athanasia finally realizes someone is targeting her family. Lucas reassures her he'll protect her and the Emperor, then uses magic to help her sleep so she can rest. Elsewhere, Anastasius reveals the truth to Roger. The Emperor has been cursed and is slowly dying. Roger is disturbed by how casually Anastasius talks about it. But the magician doesn't care. He's driven purely by revenge and ambition. He wants the throne and wants Cloud gone. Roger refuses to support the plan, but Anastasius isn't the type to take no for an answer. He wipes Roger's memory and takes control of him like a puppet. A few hours later, Ezekiel visited his father to discuss a serious issue. Rumors about the Emperor's illness were spreading across the empire like wildfire. Roger brushed it off, claiming it wasn't a big deal if people knew about the Emperor's condition. But something felt wrong. Ezekiel immediately noticed his father was acting strangely, and even the color of his eyes seemed different. Sensing that something was terribly off, he decided to leave. What he didn't know was that Anastasius was the one pulling the strings. Although Roger was under his control, the spell wasn't perfect. At one point, Roger even threw objects at him, proving that Anastasius's powers were weakening and that Roger's body wasn't as useful as he'd hoped. A week passed, and Athanasia stayed constantly by her father's side. She ignored every invitation and letter that arrived because she knew the nobles weren't writing out of concern, they were fishing for information. Everyone seemed suspiciously aware of the Emperor's illness, and Athanasia couldn't understand how the secret had spread so quickly. While discussing the situation with Felix, she pointed out that only a handful of people knew the truth, meaning someone had to be leaking information. Felix finally revealed that something similar had happened in the past, but back then nobody found out, so it never became a problem. This time, however, every noble in the empire knew, and they would surely try to take advantage of the Emperor's condition. Since someone needed to rule in his place, Felix insisted that Athanasia, as his daughter, should step up and act on his behalf. Later, Athanasia shared Felix's words with Lucas. She wasn't sure she could handle such a massive responsibility, but she also didn't want to disappoint her father. After all, when he woke up, she wanted him to find everything running smoothly. Lucas wasn't exactly optimistic about the Emperor waking up anytime soon, but he encouraged her anyway. He reminded her that she was smart, capable, and no longer a child, and if anyone refused to listen to her, well, according to Lucas, she could always throw them in a dungeon. Meanwhile, Jeanette sat alone in her room feeling miserable. Ezekiel had been so busy lately that she felt completely forgotten. She even convinced herself that Athanasia didn't want to see her anymore since a letter she had sent received no reply. She desperately wanted to ask about the Emperor's condition, but she knew Anastasius wouldn't allow it. Ever since their strange encounter, she had been filled with questions, especially about how he had suddenly appeared at her house. Her thoughts were interrupted when a maid informed her that the Duke wished to see her. When she arrived at his office, she found Roger there alongside Anastasius, and Roger claimed he had something very important to discuss. At the same time, Athanasia finally prepared herself to take on the role of acting crown princess and help govern the empire while her father remained unconscious. She was nervous and worried about making mistakes, but Lucas continued cheering her on. Soon, she made her grand entrance before the empire's highest-ranking nobles. The room was packed, and even Roger was present. The pressure was overwhelming, but Athanasia reminded herself that her father had once stood in the exact same position. If he could do it, then she would do her best to carry the empire until he returned. Athanasia stood before the Senate and calmly explained that His Majesty had been mentally exhausted and had decided to take a short vacation. Because of this, she requested their approval for her to temporarily take his place until he returned. However, the nobles quickly became suspicious. Chaos of House Redford openly mentioned the rumors about the Emperor being sick, trying to pressure her. Athanasia refused to be intimidated. With a cold expression, just like her father, she sharply asked if he was disrespecting her just because she was a young princess. Her firm attitude silenced the entire room. Most of the nobles eventually agreed and signed their approval, but Roger suddenly raised his hand. He questioned why the Emperor was absent, shocking everyone. Athanasia noticed something was clearly off about him, especially since he had always been one of the Emperor's most loyal supporters. Still, she stayed composed and carefully avoided confirming anything about her father's condition, insisting that the Senate meeting was only to manage his vacation. Her calm control surprised many nobles, even Felix, who felt relieved seeing her handle the pressure so well. Then Roger pushed further, asking direct questions about the emperor's illness and even demanding the name of the disease. Athanasia saw through his intentions and refused to play along. She firmly stated that spreading false rumors about the imperial family was a crime and promised to investigate and punish those responsible. But suddenly, a man in a black cloak began laughing. When he removed his hood, everyone was shocked it was Anastasius, the former emperor, alive and standing there. Felix immediately stepped in front of Athanasia to protect her, while the nobles froze in disbelief. Anastasius acted arrogantly, claiming his status made him untouchable. Athanasia was confused and shaken, realizing this was the same man she believed had died at her father's hands. Now he was suddenly back, accusing others and stirring chaos. As everything clicked in her mind, she realized the terrifying possibility. He might be the one behind her father's condition and the dark magic affecting him. Felix wanted to strike him down, but Athanasia stopped him, knowing the situation had become far more dangerous than she ever expected. The man then started attacking Athanasia's legitimacy, claiming her mana instability made the nobles doubt whether she was truly the emperor's daughter. He went even further, accusing the emperor of using dark magic just to conceive her. The hall quickly turned chaotic, as the nobles became confused and unsure of what to believe. Since Athanasia's mother was a foreign dancer, he twisted that fact into suspicion, suggesting that was the only reason the emperor had been involved with her. Anastasius then challenged Athanasia directly, asking if the emperor was really sick and not just spreading rumors, why he wasn't present, and why she didn't simply summon him. Athanasia immediately realized he was setting a trap. Staying calm, she asked Felix to send a letter to the palace and bring both the emperor and Lucas, the imperial mage. Hearing Lucas's name made Anastasius visibly uneasy, since Lucas was known to be extremely powerful. Athanasia noticed his reaction, but he still had another plan. With manipulation and pressure, Anastasius managed to clear the room of nobles, leaving only a few behind. His real goal was simple: isolate Athanasia so there would be no witnesses. Once everyone left, he revealed the truth long ago. He had been defeated by his younger brother and left for dead. But instead of dying, he was saved by a mage who took over his body in exchange for survival. Athanasia quickly understood the danger. Even Felix's sword wouldn't be enough to defeat him. Seeing the dark energy around Anastasius, she stopped Felix from attacking, knowing it would only get him killed. Felix reluctantly obeyed, realizing protecting her mattered more than rushing in blindly. Anastasius, satisfied with how things were going, began to notice something else. Athanasia truly was Cloud's daughter, carrying immense mana power. That also caught Lucas's attention. Afterward, Anastasius and Roger left, leaving Athanasia alone and overwhelmed. She broke down in tears, feeling helpless as her father lay unconscious. Still, she decided she had to tell everything to Lucas. Meanwhile, Lucas was already struggling to suppress the Emperor's curse with his magic, doing everything he could to keep him alive. Soon after, Athanasia arrived in Felix's arms and explained everything that had happened. Lucas told her that if he wanted, he could eliminate Anastasius and everyone standing against her, but Athanasia refused. She knew violence wasn't the answer. Instead, she forced herself to think clearly and strategically, realizing the Senate would now spread even more dangerous rumors. She also couldn't understand how Roger had been manipulated so easily and feared that if they proved her father used dark magic, her uncle would use it as the perfect opportunity to seize the throne. Lucas was confused because Athanasia seemed to understand his abilities, but she still refused to use them. Even though he was ready to eliminate the former emperor, Athanasia didn't want that option. She feared it would cause serious side effects, and she didn't want a member of her father's family to die twice. Still, she understood why her father hated that man so deeply. Lucas, however, had started noticing something strange. Whenever Jeanette was near the emperor, his pain would suddenly disappear. That made him suspicious, and he began connecting the dots. He realized Anastasius had already been inside Jeanette's home, which meant things were more connected than they seemed. At the same time, Lucas also understood a shocking truth. Jeanette was actually the biological daughter of the former emperor. But even knowing this, he couldn't understand why Athanasia was still allowing Jeanette into the palace. Athanasia herself was now worried. If Jeanette ever discovered that the current emperor was not her real father, but Anastasius, everything could collapse emotionally and politically. Meanwhile, Jeanette sat in her room feeling confused and sad. Roger visited her, trying to influence her thoughts now that she knew the former emperor was alive. He hinted that she could become a princess if her true identity was revealed, and even mentioned rumors about removing Cloud from power. Jeanette stayed silent, unsure of what to believe. Roger tried to plant doubts in her mind, suggesting that both the emperor and the princess already knew about her existence. Jeanette, however, only felt more lost. She didn't understand why the former emperor had approached her in the first place and whether his intentions were good or not. She tried to convince herself that Athanasia still cared about her, because in her heart, the princess felt different from everyone else. But her hope broke a little when she noticed the bag Athanasia had given her was torn. To Jeanette, it felt like a sign that she no longer belonged beside the princess. Elsewhere, a maid delivered a message to Felix from Ezekiel, asking to meet urgently. Felix was suspicious but agreed and met him in an old cabin. Ezekiel said he was only there to help the princess and quickly got to the point. He explained that his father had been acting strangely, along with several other nobles, as if someone were controlling them. Even the Duke was behaving unnaturally. He added that everything seemed to change after the former emperor appeared at the mansion. Felix realized Ezekiel was telling the truth. Ezekiel only wanted to save his father, who was clearly not acting normally. Later, Felix reported everything back to Athanasia. As she listened, she finally began connecting all the pieces. It was becoming clear her uncle was likely using dark magic and mind control. Felix also mentioned that Jeanette was feeling lonely and wanted to see her. Hearing this, Athanasia realized that the situation was becoming even more complicated, and every decision she made now could change everything. Athanasia was now carefully connecting all the pieces like a puzzle, and everything finally seemed to make sense. She was convinced that her uncle was using dark magic for mind control. Felix also told her that Ezekiel had mentioned Jeanette was feeling sad because she couldn't speak with Athanasia, but Athanasia decided it wasn't the right time for them to meet, given how unstable the situation had become. Meanwhile, in the palace, the former emperor was alone with Jeanette. She felt confused and unsure, but eventually asked him why he was really there. He explained his story, claiming that he had risked his life to help her mother, Penelope, escape. He said he never knew she would die after giving birth, and that he had been searching for her ever since. He also claimed he discovered Roger had taken her in by mistake. According to him, he feared Cloud would harm Jeanette because of his obsession with killing his own daughter, so he returned in secret to protect her and keep her safe. After hearing this, Jeanette sat alone in her room, thinking deeply about everything he said. However, she didn't fully trust his words. Something about his story felt off, especially since she couldn't find any record of him in the books about the royal ancestors. Soon after, Roger arrived and told Jeanette she must prepare herself because she would soon take her place as the crown princess. As the crown princess, the day of the royal assembly finally arrived. Every high-ranking noble had gathered, but nobody seemed interested in politics as much as they were interested in gossip. Rumors about His Majesty's poor health were everywhere, and people had already started whispering that if the emperor failed to recover, his older brother, Anastasius, would take the throne. Of course, Anastasius saw the perfect chance to make a move. Since everyone was already present, he brought Jeanette and proudly introduced her as his daughter. And because of that, it became completely reasonable for Jeanette to live in the palace just like Athanasia. Athanasia stayed silent the whole time, but her eyes were doing all the talking. She looked absolutely annoyed at her uncle's behavior. That fool acted like he understood her feelings and casually said that since she and Jeanette were already close, there shouldn't be any problem getting along. He even added that Athanasia could help her adjust to life in the empire. That only made Athanasia more irritated, especially after hearing that Jeanette would stay in the exact same palace as her. Annie knew she couldn't stop them. By law, they had every right to stay there, and with her father too weak to stand against them, she had no choice but to accept it. Meanwhile, Anastasius noticed Jeanette's expression and secretly felt pleased. This would make her easier to manipulate. In his eyes, Athanasia not greeting Jeanette properly was already creating distance between them. After leaving Jeanette in her room, he told her to get some rest because she would soon attend the assembly meeting. After all, she was a princess now, and he was her father. As Anastasius walked away, he remembered his clash with Roger. The evil mage inside him could still feel the wound refusing to heal. He realized his current body had become too weak, but Jeanette's body, on the other hand, looked much more suitable for survival. Elsewhere, Annie buried herself in unfinished paperwork, but her thoughts drifted away. She remembered a story about a dragon who breathed fire just to scare everyone. One day, a little princess asked him why he acted so cold and terrifying. Suddenly, she remembered her father's words, "If I don't act like this, one day they'll try to take my place." Annie snapped back to reality and realized how strange her thoughts had become. But honestly, maybe there was some truth to it. The nobles praised the emperor to his face, yet behind his back they feared what would happen if no one strong remained to protect them. Still, Annie's biggest concern wasn't politics, it was her uncle. Because of him, she never even got the chance to greet Jeanette properly. That night, Jeanette sat alone in her room feeling miserable. She couldn't stop thinking about Athanasia's reaction and worried that the friendship they had built might break apart. Then suddenly tap. Someone knocked on her window. Jeanette opened it and found Annie standing there. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Annie understood. Her reaction earlier had been unfair, and her uncle was mostly to blame. But Jeanette simply smiled sadly and said her father had returned only for her, and that he would never hurt her. She trusted that man completely. Athanasia didn't know how to remove that blind trust. Jeanette then asked quietly if it was true that the emperor was seriously ill. Annie answered carefully, saying he was only exhausted and needed rest. Still, she remembered her father accusing her uncle of using black magic, and deep down, she couldn't stop thinking that maybe he had been telling the truth. But she stayed silent. A few hours later, Annie explained everything to Lucas. After their argument, she had gone back to visit her father. Deep inside, Annie knew Jeanette wasn't foolish. Maybe Jeanette had noticed the lies from the beginning. And maybe, the reason she never asked questions was because she didn't want the answers. Jeanette never asked too many questions because she never wanted to create problems. Besides, in her dreams she had seen herself and her father living happily together. But reality was turning out very differently. Her father had returned, yet the emperor still hadn't woken up. Annie couldn't stop worrying about her father's condition, but Lucas assured her he was doing everything possible to help him recover. Then Lucas suddenly noticed the ribbon Jeanette had given Athanasia. At first glance, it looked harmless, but something about it felt wrong. While Lucas had been away at the World Tree, something had clearly changed. The ribbon wasn't ordinary, it was magical. The moment he examined it, his expression changed. That ribbon carried dark magic. And not just any dark magic, it felt almost identical to the energy surrounding the emperor. Everything clicked. That ribbon wasn't just an accessory. It was the trigger used to place the curse on her father. Lucas immediately connected the dots and explained that the Chimera had been working with Uncle Anastasius all along. When the emperor collapsed, she had been right there beside him. Annie froze. Then anger hit. She couldn't believe Jeanette had deceived her again. But before she could jump to conclusions, Lucas grabbed her arm. He had seen this type of magic before. He explained that the dark energy flowing through the emperor's body was preventing him from remembering anything. Worse, if he survived, his power could grow even stronger. Annie remembered the original story. Nobody had ever been strong enough to challenge her father. But black magic always comes with a price. Power never arrives for free. Lucas believed Anastasius had used forbidden magic during Jeanette's birth, and now he was paying for it. His body was weakening as the cost finally caught up to him. Meanwhile, Jeanette sat alone in her room feeling miserable. Unable to stay still, she decided to walk through the palace halls. As she passed her father's room, she noticed the door was slightly open. Curious, she stepped closer. Inside, she heard voices. Her father and someone else. They were arguing. The atmosphere felt wrong. Fear crawled up her spine, and she quietly turned to leave, but suddenly her father appeared behind her. His eyes looked cold, almost sinister. Jeanette quickly apologized and explained she only came because she couldn't sleep. Instantly, his expression softened. Too quickly. With a warm smile, he invited her inside. Jeanette was terrified, until she realized he was completely alone. Back with Annie and Lucas, Lucas revealed another shocking discovery. He could sense Adernita's magic hidden inside the Emperor's curse. It was the exact same magic stolen from his tower before it was destroyed. That meant Uncle Anastasius had stolen Lucas's magic and twisted it for his own use. And the target was the Emperor. Lucas admitted that because of this, he had slept for hundreds of years while searching for the object carrying the curse. Now he finally knew. The ribbon had been the carrier all along. Annie remembered meeting Jeanette in the village and feeling a strange magic that reminded her of Lucas. Now she understood. It had always been his stolen power. Lucas finally realized why his own magic reacted strangely whenever he tried helping Cloud. The two magics were mixed together, making it impossible to fully remove the curse. Annie still couldn't understand one thing. Why was Adernita's doing all of this? Lucas answered simply. People who use dark magic are rarely satisfied. They always want more power than they already have. And it was possible that this twisted mage had hidden himself inside the body of the former Emperor Anastasius. Lucas was furious. Anastasius had once been the strongest emperor in Obelia's history. Now everything had become a tangled mess of stolen power and corruption. Even Lucas couldn't fully control the situation anymore. But Annie wasn't thinking about power. She was thinking about Jeanette. Did she know the truth? Or was she just another puppet being used? That thought hurt more than she expected. Because while she kept trying to protect herself, she hadn't once stopped to protect Jeanette. While Annie was crying, Lucas suddenly froze. Behind her, he saw the soul of her mother. Shocked, Lucas quickly told Annie something important. If she could obtain the fruit of the world tree, she might be able to save her father. That fruit could restore magical power and heal damaged energy. But there was a problem. Even Lucas himself had never been able to get it. Annie broke down in tears. Without the fruit, there seemed to be no way to save her father. Then Lucas said something unexpected. Even if the fruit was impossible to get, he still had something else that might help the branch of the world tree. He had stolen it before for his own purpose, but now saving the Emperor mattered more than anything else. The moment Annie touched the branch, everything changed. She was suddenly transported to a strange place, a massive white tree glowing like snow, towering into the sky. She stood there frozen, like she had stepped into another world. Back in reality, Lucas had to carry her to the sofa because she couldn't even move. After a while, Annie suddenly woke up and asked where she was. Lucas was furious. She had grabbed the branch without thinking, even after being warned. But Annie was excited. She said she had seen the world tree, and now she could save her father. Then Lucas noticed something strange in her eyes. They looked glassy, almost enchanted. He realized it immediately. The tree was influencing her. He told her to calm down and explained again that things were not that simple. Her father was unconscious and might not even be able to use healing magic. But Annie refused to give up. She insisted she would save him herself, because the tree had told her she could. Lucas clenched his fists. He understood what was happening. The world tree was clearly taking revenge for the branch he had stolen. But Annie didn't want to listen. She even said the tree told her something else, that the so-called Tree of the Gods might not even exist. Lucas knew exactly what she meant, but he chose not to explain everything yet. Instead, he warned her one last time. If she used that method, she might die in the process. But Annie doesn't care about the risk. Her only goal is to save her father. Lucas gets frustrated. He can't understand why she's willing to sacrifice everything for someone he could literally defeat with a single move, even the former emperor. Still, he feels stuck, so he agrees to hear her plan. But he doesn't approve of it. If anything goes wrong, Anastasius and the evil mage would be free to take over the empire and burn everything to the ground. That night, Athanasia wakes up from a nightmare, or maybe a vision. She sees Zenit again with her father. But this time she also recognizes the man standing with them, Anastasius. The message is clear: if her father doesn't wake up, disaster is coming. The next day, Athanasia continues handling her father's duties while keeping nobles away by saying the emperor is on vacation. The nobles start gossiping, but Felix shuts them down instantly with his intimidating presence. He also reports suspicious movements. There may already be a rebellion forming. Later, Athanasia tells Lucas about her vision. She's convinced that if her father stays unconscious, Anastasius will start a war. Meanwhile, Lucas was having his own quiet moment of drama, mentally promising himself that if that wicked sorcerer so much as looked at Athanasia the wrong way, he'd tear the entire empire apart with his bare hands. Priorities, apparently. As Lucas got lost in his very intense thoughts, Athanasia snapped him back to reality with a bombshell. She wanted to use a branch from the world tree. Lucas immediately shut that down. The idea of Athanasia disappearing was simply not something he could live with, quite literally. He did, however, share some lighter news. He'd visited Zenith, and from now on, he'd be fighting for everyone, not just himself. Character growth? Shortly after, Athanasia invited Jeanette over for tea, partly for the refreshments, partly to apologize for how badly she'd been behaving lately. Over steaming cups, Athanasia came clean. She'd been cold and distant because she feared Jeanette was there to replace her, and that fear had turned her into someone she wasn't proud of. She'd been so wrapped up in insecurity that she almost pushed away the people she loved most. So this time, she was done with the game's full honesty, no filter. What she didn't expect was for Jeanette to burst into tears. Athanasia was baffled. Shouldn't she be the one crying, or at least the one being cried at? But Jeanette wasn't angry. She was heartbroken, convinced that somehow all of this mess was her fault. Neither of them could bring themselves to stay mad, and before long, they were both crying and hugging it out like the emotionally chaotic duo they were. When Athanasia reported back to Lucas, he was less than thrilled. His instructions had been simple: make up with Jeanette, not tell her everything. But Athanasia stood firm. Jeanette deserved to know the truth so she could make her own choices, rather than be used as a pawn by someone else. Besides, Jeanette had already noticed something was off with Atanasio. During a recent visit, she'd watched his expression shift completely mid-conversation, his whole manner changing as if someone else had quietly slipped into his body. Lucas wasn't surprised. He already knew Cerritos was alive and lurking. What worried him was that his uncle might soon realize Jeanette had figured out his little secret, putting her in real danger. All of this made waking the Emperor more urgent than ever. Lucas tried to steer Athanasia away from the idea, not wanting her to risk her life. But Athanasia wasn't having it. She told him that if she had appeared in this world, it was for a reason, and whatever destiny was waiting for her, she intended to meet it head-on, with courage. She also played her cards cleverly. Knowing Lucas was dying to know what the World Tree had told her, she offered him a deal: show her the branch, and maybe she'd remember. He flat out refused. So did Jeanette, for that matter. But Athanasia's mind was made up. She even told Felix about the plan, who also begged her not to do it, but she promised him she'd come back. She asked him to keep Lily in the dark, because the news would devastate her. And just in case things went sideways, she'd written a letter for Felix to deliver to Lily personally. With her affairs in order, her father's documents, letters to Keel and Lily, every loose end tied, Athanasia stood ready. Only one thing remained: saving her father. To perform the ritual, Athanasia needed somewhere quiet and comfortable. Felix immediately volunteered to move the Emperor wherever was needed. But Lucas waved him off. He'd handle the relocation himself, magically and efficiently. Athanasia also reassured Felix that everything would be fine, though Felix, bless his heart, had only one wish: for his princess to come back in one piece. Athanasia understood his worry and pulled him into a tight hug, which left Felix genuinely surprised and Lucas just a little bit annoyed. Typical. Minutes later, everything was in place. Lucas walked Athanasia through the instructions carefully. Once she saw the World Tree, she needed to focus, and not just vaguely focus, but really hold on to something that mattered deeply to her. Because if her concentration slipped, she wouldn't be coming back. She'd be stuck in that world forever. Her one job was to follow her father's magical energy, grab it, and bring it back with her. Simple enough, right? The ritual began. Athanasia took Lucas's hand and felt herself falling fast. A flood of images, memories, and experiences came rushing at her all at once, and her head felt like it was about to split open from the pressure. But she held on, anchored by the thought of everyone who loved her and was praying for her safe return. Then she heard Lucas's voice cutting through the chaos, urging her to say her name. The moment she did, A wave of suffocating air crashed over her, and then, just like that, someone pulled her out. Back in the real world, Lucas stood stunned, watching a radiant glow pour from the Emperor's body. Athanasia, meanwhile, was discovering exactly who had saved her. It was her mother, Diana. Diana was overjoyed, showering her daughter with kisses and holding her close, taking in just how much she had grown. Athanasia, for her part, was a complete mess, confused, overwhelmed, and utterly speechless. Then the tears came, because this was the moment she had always dreamed of, seeing her mother, face to face. The two of them poured their hearts out, expressing just how much they had missed each other and how deeply they loved one another. Diana thanked Athanasia for being so incredibly brave in protecting her father all this time. She also revealed that she had never truly left. She had been right there beside them the whole time, watching over them quietly. She hadn't been reborn yet. Only a part of her remained in that place, held there by her love for her daughter, her husband, and the family she couldn't bring herself to leave. And she had no regrets, because she had watched Athanasia grow into someone strong, capable, and full of heart. Athanasia, ever focused even in the middle of an emotional reunion, told her mother she needed to find her father and help him. Diana gently reassured her that he was perfectly fine. He had been with Diana from the moment he fell into his coma, and he was fully aware of everything happening in the Empire. But Diana wasn't about to let this rare moment go to waste. She took the opportunity to do what she came to do: help Athanasia find what she had been searching for all along, the origin of her father's curse. Before Athanasia left, Diana had one small request: go back and say hello to Lily and Felix, and thank them, from her, for taking such good care of her daughter. Diana also shared something quietly beautiful from the very moment she found out she was pregnant. She had loved her little girl completely, and without condition, right up until the very end. Meanwhile, back in the world of the living, Lucas was fighting a losing battle against his own feelings. For the first time in a long time, Lucas was beginning to understand something he had never wanted to face: the unbearable weight of potentially losing someone who truly mattered to him. It finally clicked why his father had completely fallen apart after losing his mother. The will to keep going, the desire to fight, all of it vanishes when the person who makes it worthwhile might not be there anymore. Lucas was living that realization in real time, and he did not enjoy it one bit. Then, suddenly, a brilliant light burst from the Emperor's body. Lucas's heart lifted. That could only mean one thing: the curse had been broken. Athanasia had done it. The Emperor, Claude, began to wake up. But there was a problem. Athanasia wasn't moving. Lucas started to panic, but before he could do anything, the Emperor gave him a quiet signal: don't make a sound. Something was still happening. Inside her dream, Athanasia was watching her father's life unfold like a story she never knew she needed to hear. She saw him as a little boy, and she saw his older brother Atanasio, who had once been warm and attentive, caring for him through illness. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that warmth curdled into something cold and hostile. The brother who once looked at Claude with love began looking at him like a stranger, or worse, an obstacle. Claude had felt utterly alone. He believed both his brother and his sister, Empress Astra, despised him. And as if that weren't enough, his mother, the one person who might have made it bearable, was gravely ill. She passed away, leaving him completely on his own. Watching all of this, Athanasia felt the weight of her father's loneliness settle over her like a heavy coat. She finally understood the kind of pain he had carried, and everything he had quietly endured just to keep moving forward. Then the memories shifted, and the story got a little brighter. Athanasia watched the exact moment her father first laid eyes on Diana, radiant, warm, and breathtaking. Those memories glowed differently from the rest, lit up from the inside. Athanasia wanted to stay in them, to soak up every happy moment her father had ever known. But the light faded. The memories went dark, and all that was left was the image of her father, crying in a way that had no bottom to it. Athanasia could feel it, not just see it, but feel it deep in her chest, as though something was being ripped from her soul the same way it had been ripped from his. This was the grief that had broken him, the grief of losing Diana. And because he couldn't bear to live inside that kind of pain, he had turned to dark magic to simply switch it all off, to hollow himself out. That was why her father had been living in black and white ever since, not cold by nature, but by choice, because feeling anything at all had become too dangerous. Then the memories shifted again, and this time Athanasia saw herself. A tiny baby, then a growing girl, slowly, stubbornly working her way into her father's heart whether he liked it or not. And he didn't like it at first. He had tried, more than once, to keep her at a distance even in his darkest moments, to be rid of her altogether. But every time he tried, something stopped him. When her magic spiraled out of control, he didn't feel relieved. He felt worried. And that worry, quiet and inconvenient as it was, kept growing. Athanasia watched her entire childhood through her father's eyes. She saw the moment of that terrible accident, and she saw Claude, without a second of hesitation, throw himself into danger to save her. No calculation, no strategy. Just a father who had, somewhere along the way, decided that this girl was worth protecting with everything he had. Athanasia woke up with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Her father was right there beside her. That was enough. Claude, now awake and fully present, felt a complicated storm of emotions, relief, joy, and a deep, bewildered concern. He couldn't understand why his daughter had risked so much for him. But for Athanasia, the answer was simple. It was exactly what he would have done for her. Claude looked relieved but also confused. He couldn't understand why she had risked so much for him. Athanasia thought that was funny because he literally jumped into a mana explosion for her. Obviously he did it because he loved her. But Claude now remembered everything and wished he had never survived if it meant the curse would return. He couldn't stop thinking about how much he had hurt Anastasia. And of course, because every family drama needs one professional eavesdropper, Lucas was casually listening behind the door. Claude was drowning in regret. He hated remembering all the cruel things he had said to Athanasia, and even imagined his wife scolding him for all of it. Athanasia admitted she hated the way he treated her and how deeply he hurt her. Since she knew her father was terrible at apologizing and scared of rejection, she practically shook the apology out of him. Through tears, Claude finally said he was sorry. Athanasia wasn't satisfied yet, though she wanted maximum regret mode activated. She yelled that she hated him, and instead of defending himself, Claude hugged her and apologized over and over until both of them completely broke down. Somewhere between all the crying and emotional damage, they finally forgave each other. Then Felix barged in looking way too cheerful for the situation. The Emperor jokingly asked if Felix wasn't going to cry too, and Felix admitted he had already done enough crying while waiting for them to wake up. Athanasia quickly moved to business and asked what was happening with the Empire. Felix explained that they had tried to hide the fact that His Majesty had returned, but people still demanded proof that he was innocent of using dark magic. Claude decided it was finally time to fix everything. Athanasia immediately worried he was about to solve the problem by deleting half the population. But instead she had a better idea: bring out Lucas as the legendary Tower Mage. Felix and Claude already knew who he really was, and now that Lucas no longer needed to stay hidden and guard her father, he could finally appear in public and help prove Claude's innocence. Unfortunately, not everyone seemed convinced. Felix actually liked Athanasia's idea. In his opinion, there were definitely people who deserved punishment for everything that happened, but that could wait for her father to handle. Lucas, meanwhile, would take care of cleaning up the rest of the mess. He revealed that someone from his past was involved in all of this Artemis. More importantly, he had to protect Obelia at all costs because someone extremely important to him lived there now. And yes, he meant Athanasia. Not subtle at all. A few days later, Keel visited Athanasia to ask if his father could finally get some rest. But Athanasia basically said, "Nice try." Until the whole situation with Emperor Claude was solved, nobody was going anywhere. Keel accepted it, but asked how the investigation was going. Athanasia explained that they had a magical verification method, a magic circle that reacts to blood if traces of dark magic are present. That's when Athanasia suddenly noticed Keel acting suspiciously, like he was about to attack. Instantly, Athanasia grabbed him and called him an idiot for trying to assassinate a royal family member. Then, just like he had done with Keel's father before, he tried to invade Keel's mind. Too bad for him, because this entire thing was a setup. The second Athanasia made contact, Keel's body reacted and activated a hidden spell. Athanasia immediately recognized the magic. Earlier that day, Lucas had placed a spell on Keel that would only activate upon contact. Athanasia thanked Keel for helping, though she was worried he was putting himself in danger. But by this point Athanasia had already dragged the entire Alpheus family into this chaos, and Keel wanted to help save his family. Also, helping Athanasia may or may not have been extra motivation. So yes, Keel willingly turned himself into magical bait. In an instant, a giant magic circle trapped Athanasia, and no matter what he tried, he couldn't break free. Capturing him became surprisingly easy. Not long after, Lucas appeared and immediately got to work. And by work, I mean interrogating the former emperor, or more accurately, the mage hiding inside him. Lucas looked unusually calm, which was impressive because apparently he was holding back an incredible urge to choose violence. Why? Because he promised the princess he wouldn't go overboard. So instead of ending the guy, he settled for causing enough pain to get answers and gather proof that Emperor Claude was innocent. After weakening him, Lucas took out a crystal containing Athanasia's blood. Once the enemy was powerless, he removed the spell because he already had everything he needed. Hours later, all the nobles received invitations and were transported directly into the Magic Tower Hall. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. Anastasia stepped forward and announced that today would finally prove her father's innocence. One noble immediately complained and accused them of covering up evidence. Big mistake. Lucas calmly reminded everyone whose tower they were standing in. His magical power could become unpredictable if people caused too much trouble. And just to make the rules extra clear, he casually mentioned that anyone caught lying might leave with fewer functioning limbs than they arrived with. Suddenly, nobody had questions anymore. The nobles were shocked because after all these years, the mysterious tower mage had finally appeared, and he was standing right beside the princess. Meanwhile, Anastasius realized Ada's wasn't responding anymore. Maybe Lucas had done something to him, or maybe the guy simply decided disappearing was healthier. Soon, the ritual began. To verify everything once and for all, they prepared Anastasius's blood sample and started the magical examination because if anyone held the answer to the truth, it was him. The ritual finally answered everything. Claude's blood stayed normal, proving once and for all that he was innocent. But Anastasius's blood, the moment it turned black, the entire room basically went silent. That was all the proof they needed. He had been using dark magic the whole time. Anyone who had supported him or defended him suddenly realized they had made some very bad life choices, because now they would all be investigated and punished as followers of dark magic. As for Athanasia's uncle, his future plans were officially cancelled. He was sent straight to the dungeon with magical restraints, so escape wouldn't even be an option. Surprisingly, he didn't resist at all. Maybe Lucas standing nearby had something to do with that. Nobody wanted to test their luck. With that, the verification ceremony finally ended. Lucas handed every noble a magical card so they could safely return home, because despite everything, customer service still mattered. Before they left, Anastasia kindly reminded everyone that those who sided with the former emperor should probably start preparing explanations immediately. There was definitely one very nervous noble in particular. Meanwhile, Athanasia finally relaxed. She knew the truth would spread across the empire faster than palace gossip, which was saying something. Then Lucas casually snapped his fingers and sent the prisoner straight to his cell for what looked like a very long retirement, except with no freedom and significantly fewer privileges. Later, Anastasia visited her father. For once, Claude looked peaceful and relaxed. She happily told him that her uncle had been imprisoned and soon everyone would know the truth. But she was confused because she honestly expected her father to solve things the old-fashioned emperor way, by deleting the problem permanently. Instead, Claude surprised her. This time, he decided to listen to his princess. Since she asked him not to do anything extreme, he obeyed. He even praised her and said she had done a good job. Athanasia immediately powered up with maximum daughter energy and proudly declared that she learned everything from her dad. Then she ruined the emotional moment by asking him to help review paperwork. Claude instantly remembered he was still on vacation and suddenly became very interested in resting. The next day, thousands of gifts arrived for the princess. News had spread at record speed, and now everyone wanted to be on the winning team. Nobles who had been suspicious yesterday were suddenly lifelong supporters overnight. Amazing how that works. Then Jeanette arrived. She quickly went to Athanasia's room and explained that her father had been imprisoned because it turned out he really had used dark magic. But she wanted one favor: she wanted to see him. Deep down, she believed maybe Artemis had influenced him and that perhaps he wasn't completely responsible for everything. Athanasia looked at Jeanette and noticed something else. She looked exhausted and messy. It became obvious the servants had started treating her badly because she was the daughter of a traitor. Athanasia knew people would judge her because of her family, but she wasn't okay with that. She decided she would stand beside Jeanette publicly and show everyone they were close. Maybe then people would finally stop treating her unfairly. Soon after, the two of them went to the dungeon. But when they arrived, they froze. Anastasius was covered in blood and unconscious. Hours later, Anastasius was moved to a room where Lucas tried to examine him. Lucas kept reminding Athanasia that he wasn't a healer, he was just a mage, but she begged him to help anyway. She couldn't bear the thought of Jeanette losing both Roger and Anastasius, since they were the two people she cared about most. Curious, Athanasia asked how Roger was doing after everything that had happened. Lucas explained that Roger was still weak, but thankfully, his life was no longer in danger. Just then, angry shouting echoed through the halls. Roger had woken up, grabbed a sharp object, and rushed toward Jeanette. Clutching her tightly, he desperately begged her to leave because Anastasius was too dangerous. At that exact moment, Anastasius regained consciousness and saw Roger charging straight at Jeanette. Completely confused, he shouted in panic, only to realize that Roger wasn't attacking her at all, he was protecting her. After all, Roger had raised Jeanette like his own daughter. Unfortunately, both men were still too weak, and they collapsed moments later. Lucas soon arrived while Annie escorted Jeanette away to calm her down. He explained that Roger's strange behavior was the result of years of brainwashing by the soul possessing Anastasius. Although Lucas had broken the mind control, the emotional scars were still there. Annie pointed out that Roger's actions proved something important. Yes, he had once hoped to use Jeanette for his own goals, but somewhere along the way, those feelings became genuine love. For the first time in her life, Jeanette realized she had never truly been alone. Roger had always considered her family and had been protecting her all along. Annie gently encouraged her to talk to him because, despite his mistakes, Roger wasn't a bad person. As if on cue, a maid rushed in to announce that Roger was awake and asking for Jeanette. She wasted no time running to him. The moment Roger saw that his little girl was safe, relief washed over his face. Jeanette burst into tears, threw her arms around him, and hugged him as tightly as she could. Even Athanasia couldn't help smiling at the heartwarming reunion. Still, Annie couldn't shake one thought from her mind. Jeanette had once mentioned that the former emperor's eyes used to look completely different. That made Annie wonder who her uncle had really been before everything changed. One thing, however, was now crystal clear: Roger had always wanted to protect Jeanette from Anastasius. Over the next few days, several nobles requested an audience with Princess Athanasia, but every single request was rejected. Meanwhile, one noble began acting strangely. A mysterious voice whispered into his ear, convincing him that everyone was laughing at him and urging him to take revenge, especially against Princess Athanasia. Back at the palace, Athanasia and Claude were finally enjoying some peaceful father-daughter time together. Well, as peaceful as royal paperwork could be. Annie was drowning in endless documents while Claude only helped a little, leaving her to do most of the work. Still, seeing her father smile so peacefully made all the paperwork worth it. That peaceful moment didn't last long. Out of nowhere, a suspicious-looking man barged into the room, and judging by his creepy entrance, he definitely wasn't there to ask for directions. The man had been possessed by Eternitas, who knew that if Lucas sealed him again, he'd be forced to abandon this body as well. So before that could happen, he started insulting Athanasia, calling her nothing more than a little girl who loved being abused. Those cruel words instantly triggered painful memories from Annie's previous life, and that was a very bad idea. Claude immediately unlocked his Papa Hulk mode. With one devastating punch, he slammed the man into the ground and angrily declared that the fool had ruined his vacation with his daughter, and, even worse, dared to insult her. He then started beating the poor guy so badly that it looked like the floor needed medical attention. Lucas finally showed up, but instead of jumping in, he simply watched. Annie had to rush over, hug her father, and physically stop him before he accidentally turned the man into royal wallpaper. Once the attacker was knocked unconscious, Lucas quickly realized that Eternitas had already escaped the body. There was only one place the evil soul could return to Anastasius. Annie immediately panicked because Jeanette was still with him. When she demanded an explanation, Lucas revealed that Eternitas wasn't connected to his victims by blood. Instead, he was drawn to people consumed by hatred, jealousy, and revenge. The former emperor had never been particularly powerful, but once Eternitas possessed him, his magic skyrocketed, turning him into a monster. Athanasia sadly realized that many of the former emperor's terrible crimes had been influenced by that evil spirit. Claude then asked the question everyone was thinking: what happens to someone after they're possessed? Lucas explained that survivors could be left with permanent damage, or they might even die. Hearing that only made Annie more desperate to see Jeanette. Lucas couldn't understand why she cared so much about a chimera, but Annie saw herself in Jeanette. Both of them had grown up without a mother or father. Annie was lucky enough to reunite with her father when she was 5, but Jeanette never got that chance. Because of her painful past life, Annie understood exactly what it felt like to desperately want someone to love you. She then asked Lucas whether it was possible to kill a soul. Lucas shook his head and explained that souls couldn't truly be destroyed. Instead, he planned to seal Eternitas inside the former emperor forever. Since both Eternitas and the former emperor were equally troublesome, locking them together sounded like the perfect punishment. Normally, when someone dies without regrets, their soul returns to the world tree and is eventually reincarnated, just like Athanasia's mother. But Eternitas would never feel remorse, so sealing him away forever was the only real solution. Later, Athanasia, Claude, and Lucas headed to the dining hall, only to find Jeanette sitting beside Anastasius. At last, the two brothers faced each other across the table. Claude admitted that, thanks to Eternitas, he was still alive today. The mage inside the former emperor quickly corrected him with a polite smile, asking everyone to call him Carax instead. Annie immediately noticed the tension between her father and Carax, especially after Lucas quietly removed the protective barrier around the room. Obviously, Lucas had a plan, but whatever it was, Carax was already starting to question it. Carax couldn't understand why Claude didn't simply erase him like he had in the previous timeline. Instead of answering, Claude used a tiny bit of magic to launch a harmless attack toward Jeanette just to see Carax's reaction. Without even thinking, Carax immediately jumped in front of her to protect her. That was all Claude needed to see. As a child, he had always felt weak and alone, unable to trust anyone. Then little Athanasia was born, giving him hope and someone precious to protect. Maybe Anastasius had gone through the same thing. Still, Claude couldn't shake one question. Why was Carax always provoking him? Was he truly brought back from the dead, or had he somehow survived? Or was there another hidden reason behind everything? A moment later, Carax's soul floated out of Anastasius's body. Annie realized that her uncle had been fighting with everything he had to resist the evil mage's control because all he wanted was to protect his daughter. Finally back in control of his own body, Anastasius turned to Claude and tearfully admitted that he never wanted to fall into darkness. He said he had always cared for his younger brother, but the evil spirit slowly drove him insane. Begging for forgiveness, he looked completely broken. Unfortunately, it was all a trap. Lucas saw through the act instantly. The moment he noticed the evil mage trying to take control again, he unleashed a powerful spell that exploded between them. The evil spirit had secretly returned to Anastasius's body and planned to use Jeanette as a living magic bomb, hoping everyone would be blown to pieces. Annie watched in horror as her uncle was possessed once again. This time, Lucas stepped forward to handle it himself. As Lucas approached, Carax's magic suddenly began growing stronger. He was even using the magic he had stolen from Lucas earlier, putting everyone in serious danger. Left with no other choice, Lucas swallowed his pride and did something no one expected. He apologized to Eternitas. He promised to set him free, purify his soul, let him be reincarnated, and even accept him as his disciple afterward. Carax was completely stunned. The idea had actually come from Annie, and since Lucas had a massive soft spot for her, he decided to give it a try. For a brief moment, it looked like the plan had actually worked. Eternitas left Anastasius's body, but then pulled the biggest gotcha of the day by instantly possessing Jeanette instead. Furious, he laughed at Lucas, saying he had almost fallen for the trick but would never forgive him. He blamed Lucas for turning him into a bitter and hateful person. Lucas, however, knew that wasn't true. Eternitas wasn't the first student he had rejected, and he certainly wouldn't be the last. The difference was that everyone else moved on, while Eternitas chose hatred instead. Claude realized there was no point talking anymore. With no other options left, Lucas made the heartbreaking decision to destroy Jeanette's body and seal Eternitas inside it forever. Annie refused to let that happen. She stopped Lucas just in time, ran straight to Jeanette, called her name through tears, and wrapped her in a tight hug. That simple act of love changed everything. Eternitas could no longer remain inside a heart filled with genuine affection. Desperate, he tried to possess Anastasius again. This time, Anastasius was ready to sacrifice his own life if it meant ending Eternitas once and for all. Claude immediately stepped in and shielded his brother instead. That brief opening was all Lucas needed. He struck directly at Eternitas' soul, destroying the evil mage forever. This time, there would be no escape, no second chance, and no reincarnation. When everything was over, both Jeanette and Anastasius collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. Moments later, Felix and the Imperial guards rushed into the room. Following Claude's orders, they arrested Anastasius for attempting to murder the Imperial family. It was all part of Claude's plan to show the entire empire that the true culprit had been punished according to the law. Over the following days, word spread that Claude had officially returned from his vacation, and news of the former emperor's arrest traveled across the empire faster than gossip at a royal banquet. Plenty of people had opinions, rumors flew in every direction, and critics wouldn't stop talking, but Claude couldn't have cared less. His family was safe, and that was all that mattered.